underscore details dot address. So that's where we need to ship to, which is often going to be the same as the billing address, as I just explained, right? And then we can simply go ahead and update or order with the stuff that Stripe provided us, where we need to ship this, right? Very important. So we can say at the very bottom, let's await or database. Let's import that .order.update. And basically we want to update the order where the ID of the order is the order ID. Now, what you could also do is enforce that the user ID is in fact the user ID. We're not gonna worry about it because it doesn't really matter. This information comes from Stripe. The user has no way to modify this information. But if you wanted to go the extra mile, you could totally add this as well. It doesn't really matter. And now the data that we want to update the order with is gonna be the isPaid property and set that to true. Whenever this is called, we have done the check. This comes officially from Stripe. We are sure of that. And Stripe is telling us, hey, the user has sent the money. We've received it, or well, you've received it, right, in your Stripe account. So we can simply set the payment status to true because we know this is the case. As for the shipping address we're gonna pass in here, we are gonna create one because it probably doesn't exist yet. So we're gonna say create and we're gonna enter the name of it. That's gonna be the session.customer_details.name right here. And let's just tell TypeScript, hey dude, this will exist, don't worry about it. The city is gonna be the shipping address.city. And let's just put an exclamation point here as well. There we go. Why is this giving us an error, by the way? Type string or null? Oh, TypeScript, man. All right, let's put more exclamation points here to really tell TypeScript that this will exist, because Stripe will literally give it to us. The country is gonna be the country. There we go. Is gonna be the shipping address.country. And let's just tell TypeScript that will exist as well. And that will exist as well. Damn, man. All right, TypeScript, TypeScript is very helpful. Sometimes it's a bit annoying. Anyways, let's do the same thing for the postal code. Code. That's going to be the shipping address dot postal underscore and code. There we go. Then the street is going to be the shipping address dot, and let's tell TypeScript that will exist dot line 1 and also exclamation point. Hey, oh, by the way, this needs to be postal code. There we go. And lastly, the state is gonna be the shipping address dot state. There we go. And dude, just this will exist. Don't worry about it. All right, beautiful. And now for the billing address, it's gonna be very similar. We're gonna Alt, Shift, and arrow down the shipping address and just rename it to billing address. Billing address, there we go, as easy as that. And now, of course, we need to change the whole shipping address stuff to the billing address, just like so. And again, of course, these will be similar in most cases, but the user can choose for them to not be similar. So not in every case will they be the exact same, just mostly. Awesome. And with that out of the way, we are updating our order correctly. And now we can simply go ahead and return a next response.json from our API and simply import the next response from next/server. And inside of the JSON, we're going to pass the result. That's going to be the event, and the OK property is going to be true. Great. Now, what if anything goes wrong, right? If anything fails up here, if we throw an error, or the user maybe doesn't have an email, which, you know, really won't happen realistically, but it might, right? We can't just always assume the happy path for our code. We need to error handle properly. First thing I always do is console, oops, I didn't mean to do that. First thing I always do is console.error, the error. So it appears in our runtime logs wherever we deploy our service. And if we ever need to do debugging, then we're going to have the error right there and can actually address it. Optionally, right, what we will do at work, probably at least at my last dev job, is send this to Sentry. Sentry is an error logging tool that helps you to debug, and it's very common in enterprise applications to debug user problems. We're not going to do that. That would add a lot of overhead to this video that we don't want. And again, I personally also don't do it. This is only relevant in enterprise context and not for us. because this is not enterprise. And lastly, we're going to return a next response.json. And first thing we're going to pass in here is a object with a message of something went wrong, and then an OK property of false. And lastly, we can pass in the status in here. Status of our response is going to be 500, which is an internal server error, to let hopefully Stripe calling or webhook know that we didn't receive it properly, it wasn't processed, and Stripe will automatically try to call or API again at a later interval. So it has a delivery guarantee, which is really important for webhooks, because imagine that wasn't the case and the user actually paid, but your webhook fails and the user doesn't get what they ordered, right? That would be very, very bad. Awesome. Now we could get into local webhook testing. There are ways to do it. For example, a tool called ngrok, which basically allows you to forward local hosts to an actual website. But you probably don't have it installed. This is how I usually host my applications, or well, test the webhooks at least. I think what's a much better idea for us right now is to already deploy our application, so we don't need to do it later and we already actually get the webhook called, right? So what we're gonna do is let's already get this deployed, and the easiest way probably to deploy Next.js is on Vercel, so it makes a lot of sense for a video like this. And I also deploy a lot, not all, but a lot of personal projects on Vercel. Okay, so in order to get this deployed, we're first gonna create a GitHub repository for it. So I'm gonna head over to GitHub and click on your repositories, and let's create a new repository right here together. I'm assuming you are familiar with GitHub. You can also use GitLab if you want, just any place to store your code, and the most common by far is GitHub. We're gonna call this case Cobra. And do I have, okay, no, I already have dev. Let's just call this case Cobra, and this is later on gonna be the exact repository that I'm gonna make available to you to follow along with this video. I'm gonna make it private for now. I'm gonna make it public once I actually publish the video. So it's totally fine to mark it as private for now. We can still deploy from it, and that's gonna create our repository. Awesome. Now, once we have the repository to put our code into, let's try building our application. And that's basically gonna be a final check. Is everything correct? Can our project build successfully? And if it can, great. In that case, we know we can also successfully deploy it. In order to test this, let's run yarn build, and that's our npm run build, pnpm run build, same thing, right? And that's gonna create a production version of our entire website. It's going to be much faster. It's optimized production build. You can see that right here. So that normally also takes a bit. And did my PC crash doing this? It might have just crashed. No, it didn't crash. It's just really slow. And there is an error with our build, and I can already imagine what it is. Yes, it's literally the stupidest ESLint rule in existence. This rule is complete dog water. Nobody needs it. Everybody hates it. And it has no point because it's completely pointless. It basically tells you to replace quotes with the HTML element, and it's completely stupid. We're gonna disable it. I always do. It's the worst ESLint rule there is. So in our .eslintrc.json, which is automatically created by create next app, we're gonna also pass in the rules. And then here, this takes an object. We're gonna say React no unescaped entities, the stupidest ESLint rule in existence. We're gonna turn it off because to hell with it. I hate this rule. And then close out of our eslintrc.json, and we can simply run the build again. It's gonna warn us that we should use the Next.js elements, which we purposefully did not do, by the way. It has a purpose that we don't. Because while the normal HTML images make the page load a bit slower, they don't get lazy loaded once we navigate to the page. So it just looks better sometimes to not use the Next.js image. Okay, type error navbar cannot be used as a JSX component. Well, that's fine. That's not really an actual error, and that happens in our root layout. If you're wondering where in the file tree that is, that's right here, source app layout. That's where the current problem is. And let me look this up. This could either be fixed by just updating our TypeScript version. Let's see what's the current version we have in our package.json. TypeScript. Okay, so this is 5. Let's install the newest TypeScript version. let's say pnpm install TypeScript -d, so as a development dependency, and we want TypeScript at latest -d, so the newest version that there is of TypeScript. And the async components, the server-side React components, have actually been reworked in TypeScript, so we should be able to just use those. And let's see if the TypeScript update fixed or issue. It doesn't seem like it. Let's reload our window, and we might also need to upgrade our React types if that didn't fix the issue. It might have, it might not. Let's wait for this. It did not. Okay, that's fine. Let's navigate back into our package.json and let's install the latest React types as well. So this is nothing wrong with your code. It's just TypeScript not knowing about React server components yet. So let's also install, that's going to be at types/react at latest to install the latest types -d, and then hit install. It's gonna update our React types, and then hopefully, wow, we get more error. Whoa, what? Why do we get more? Oh no, what happened? Let's reload our window. That should not have happened. There we go. After reloading our window, now it works. Okay, so yeah, sometimes TypeScript messes it up a bit, but just make sure that you install the newest React types and the newest TypeScript, and things will work 100%. If for any reason they don't, you can always go ahead and like just add ts ignore this error. If something should still be a problem for you, if you can't upgrade your types for any reason, this is an error that's absolutely fine to ignore. And then we can simply run our build once again. And if there are no errors in our build, then we are all ready to already deploy our project first to GitHub, to push our code to GitHub, to remote, and then deploy a project on Vercel, so that we get an actual production URL for the project that we can use as the webhook source for Stripe. So let's let this load, and then hopefully we won't get any issues during the build. Great, so linting and checking validity of types, it gives us the Next.js image warning, which again is totally fine. This is intentional that we're ignoring that, and that's also something we can disable, by the way. Maybe we should. It would make the build look nicer. And there we go, our app build successfully done in 50 seconds. Beautiful. What that means is we're all ready to push our code into remote, whatever that might be for you, probably GitHub, right? So we're gonna copy the remote origin from GitHub, add that to our project by simply pasting the git remote add origin. Bam. There we go. And then we can simply say git add dot. That's going to add every file we have in our entire app to Git, so to version control. We're going to say git commit -m for a comment, and we're just going to say initial commit. And then we're going to say git push -u, so upstream origin master. So we're going to push to the master branch. Now, I also have a Mac. If you're on Mac, this might be main instead of master. So main, for me, that's usually master. And then we can hit enter. And that's going to push all of our local changes into the branch called master in our remote repository. Great. So there we are, remote resolving deltas 100%. We're all ready to go. And if we now reload our GitHub, we should be able to see that our project is right here in GitHub. Perfect. Okay, now that means we can deploy this to Vercel or any other place where you want to deploy. Probably Vercel, it's the easiest to follow along, at least. There are other places where you can deploy Next.js that are very fun, like Railway or AWS Amplify. They're also great, but just for a video, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then we can click Add New Project, and we're just going to select the project we just created. Okay, so I just logged in with GitHub, and then we're going to choose the GitHub. You're going to choose the GitHub repo you just created. I'm going to choose the Case Cobra one I created like a minute ago. Hit import. And now before you click the big ass deploy button that looks so fun to click, let's quickly paste in our environment variables. This is really important for our app to properly communicate with all the services that we need, right? So let's grab all of our .env values, and we can simply copy and paste them right here into the key field, Control V. That's gonna put all our environment variables inside of Vercel. Now there's still localhost in here. We can't change it yet because we didn't receive a domain for our project yet. So we can already deploy, and then once it's deployed successfully, then we get a domain from Vercel assigned to us that we can then use to change the environment variables to that domain where our app is hosted. And we can already then go ahead and use that domain as the basis for our webhook. And what that's going to do is, even in local development here, it's going to allow us to actually have Stripe call our live webhook. And because it interacts with the same database that we use locally, right, the webhook in the deployed version, we're still going to see the changes locally. So once we deploy this once, we don't have to test anything. In the deployed version, we can just keep on working locally, but it will just work with the webhook, which is really nice. Awesome. While we do this, we can kind of take a look at the build logs we have right here. Prisma schema loaded, integrity check passed. That's what we want to see. That is very, very nice. So this is basically running the same command that we ran locally, yarn build, right? It's kind of doing the same thing. And we get, oh, of course, the Prisma error. So this is very common when you work with Prisma and deploy it on Vercel, because Vercel caches Prisma. That's not good. Prisma has detected that this project was built on Vercel. Essentially, we need to run Prisma generate during the build process. That's what it tells us. And that's a very easy fix. We can simply go into our package.json and then define a new script at the very top. And that's going to be the post install script right here, post install. And that we need that whenever we deploy Prisma to Vercel. That's going to say Prisma generate. So during the build step, we will generate the Prisma types and everything will be fine. And dude, by the way, while we are here, we can also go into our ESLint and quickly disable this image rule, because it just kind of clogs up the build process. So we can quickly grab this name, which is the add next no image element, and simply also turn this off in ESLint, because we don't want that. Great, let's go ahead, clear this. Let's add everything we changed, which are only 2 files, by the way. Then let's say git commit -m, and we're still gonna say initial commit, doesn't really matter. And then we're gonna say git push. And because this is the second time we push, we don't need to pass the -u, which is the upstream. We don't need to pass the branch. This will automatically push to the current branch that we're on. And it will also automatically trigger a rebuild, a redeployment on Vercel with all our environment variables still in place. So if I go to my personal projects here on Vercel, then into the case scroper, which we just tried to deploy, and over to deployments, we can see that's automatically going to rebuild our project, but all the environment variables should hopefully still be, yep, right here to build with. Perfect. All right, great, ready. That means everything worked. And if we take a look at the build process, then we shouldn't be able to see any image related warnings because we turned them off in ESLint. Great. Okay, so if we now go into our settings then, and let's just reload our page real quick, Vercel should give us a URL under which this is now hosted. Great, there we are, domains casecopra.vercel.app. And if we go here, then we can see our stuff pop up right here, exactly what we worked on. Great, so not only do we know, hey, this actually works in production, which is great, this is now the URL that we can use for first off our environment variables, right? Because these still point to localhost, and of course that's a very bad idea. So let's take a look at our environment variables and change all the ones that point to localhost. For example, the kind site URL. Let's edit this one, and this needs to be this needs to be, well, let's basically just replace the existing one with casecopra with no trading slash, by the way. Let's remove that one and hit save on this one. Then let's take a look at the kind post logout redirect URL. Where should the user be sent once they log out? Same thing, or deployment domain with no trading slash, and let's hit save. This one is also still localhost. Let's change that one to be the Vercel domain as well, just like so, /auth callback, hit save, beautiful. Admin email is of course going to be the same. The next public server URL, important that we also change this. Same thing with no trading slash, and let's hit save on that. The Stripe is going to be the same, upload thing is going to be the same, database URL is going to be the same, and all the rest is going to stay the same. So let's do a final check. Great, we have no more localhost in here. We changed all of it. And now to actually apply these environment variables, we can simply redeploy or project. This is necessary for the environment variables to be updated, but we're not gonna need to do any code changes. We can simply redeploy the last deployment that actually went through successfully. Great. And while Vercel builds our project in the background and does all of that, we're gonna quickly change our Stripe webhook. So on our webhook, this one right here, casecobra.com, which we just kind of mocked, we're actually going up here to update details. And then we can simply change this URL to our deployment URL /API/webhooks. And the events to send, we're not going to select anything here. We're just going to click update endpoint because we're already listening for that event. Perfect. And once Vercel is now done redeploying our project, we can actually test the Stripe payment in production because the webhook that we created, and that's, let's give this a bit more space and close out of a lot of these files. The webhook that we just created under webhooks/route.ts, this one will actually now be called by Stripe on our production URL and update our database accordingly, right? Which is really great. And then we can see the status of the webhook right here in Stripe. So once this is done, we can already get started and start back up our development server. By the way, while Vercel is building our project, and then, okay, we already have the checkout page open. If you close out of this while I was doing all of this, you can open back up your, well, you can upload an image and you can click checkout. That's going to take you to the Stripe page. Right, the checkout page, that is exactly where we want to be right now to kind of test if the payment worked successfully. Right, so what is Vercel doing? Hey, can you just kind of build this out? And by the way, no more image-related warnings. We get some different warnings. Oh, image elements must have an alt prop. Okay, yes, for accessibility, that's a good idea. That's true, but it's not a blocker right now for us to try this out. And the deployment was successful. Beautiful. Okay, so once that's done on Vercel, let's go back to our checkout page and let's enter the test card 424242, basically a bunch of 42s, any future date and any CVC, it does not matter. And let's say, I don't know, just Josh as the card holder name. And why can we not? Oh, because we need to select an email. We can't click pay yet. So let's click the big pay button and see if this works. Let's hit pay. And that should actually, oh wait, should it? Wait, in the action, did we? Oh, maybe, yeah, maybe this doesn't work yet. We just need to try again if it doesn't work, but it might work. Let's see what happens. So what we expect to happen in the ideal case is that we can now see the called payload, the called webhook in our Stripe dashboard. What might happen is that the process.env.next public server URL was still localhost while we created the checkout page. Therefore, it doesn't use the up-to-date values from our deployment. But let's see if this works. Let's reload our Stripe page for the webhook. And then ideally, okay, so we see the webhook was fired, but it did not succeed. Something went wrong. Interesting. So it tried to call our webhook, but something didn't work. So that's already good that it tried to call our webhook. Let's quickly see why this failed. And to do so, that's why the console.error here is so handy. We can now go into our Vercel logs to see what went wrong right here in our API. Okay, so it says invalid prisma.order.update invocation. Argument city must not be known. So it seems like we are missing the city argument wherever we try to update or order. So it seems like the shipping address.city is not passed in properly. Was that a field that I forgot to fill out in the checkout form? Let's try this again. And maybe I just missed a field in the checkout page. That error has not happened before. And I want to make very sure that I'm leaving you with a working project. So that can't happen. Let's try this again. Let's customize your case and create one more checkout session with everything up to date now with our deployed kind of version that is then being called by Stripe. There we go. And hopefully that will work. So let's hit checkout. That's going to create our Stripe session. There we go. And let's try this again. So the email shipping address, let's say example town. There we go. There we go. There we go. No. So we did fill out the city. I'm pretty sure. Let's try the same thing again, card information, any future date, CVC, and let's take a very quick look. So that's everything we can fill out. We're not gonna worry about address line 2. Okay, so this should definitely work. We filled out everything. This should work. Let's try this again. And we expect to see this as another webhook. So we have 2 calls already. The next ones are gonna be determining if this works or not. So let's hit process. That is going to call our webhook under the hood by Stripe. And then we expect this to work. Okay, so the payment did work. We are redirected successfully. And now let's refresh our Stripe dashboard to see if we get a successful webhook. Yes, we do. Perfect. Okay, so the issue was that we didn't call the checkout session. We didn't create it with all the up-to-date stuff. So it probably tried to call our local endpoint. I'm not sure. But now everything works. Stripe passes us, of course, as we expected to, right? As it should. It passes us the city and the shipping address and everything. And we can also just see the data that Stripe called our webhook endpoint with, right? That might be interesting, right? The shipping details that the user filled out, that we require to fill them out, by the way, because we have the shipping address collection right here. That requires the user to put their shipping information. That is why we can make these assumptions that these will exist, right? But TypeScript doesn't know that, of course. So if you're interested, you can see all the data that Stripe calls our endpoint with. All we care about is that this actually worked, that our endpoint is called successfully. And what this also means is, even though we're now still in local development where we're going to continue, we already know now that this order was actually paid because our production webhook was called, and it does interact with the same database that we use locally, right? That is why this is so helpful now. All right, dude, great. We're just flying through this. We're making really good progress. Awesome. So what about the thank you page? How do we display to the user that their order was successful, that we received it, they paid, and all of that? That's all going to happen on this page, which currently doesn't exist. So let's close out of everything here and let's create that thank you page. So that's going to live in our app folder. Let's create a new folder in here and call it thank-u. And as always, inside of here, we're going to create a new page.tsx file that's going to contain the content that's going to be shown on the thank you page. So let's define a const page. And this is nothing more than an arrow function that we export default page at the very bottom. Oops, there we go. And inside of this page, we're going to return something called a React suspense. Right, this is something that comes from React. It's a very popular element. If you Google React suspense, and basically what it allows us to do is it lets you display a fallback until its children have finished loading. Now, why do we need to do this? Because the component we're gonna wrap inside of the suspense, that's gonna be the thank you component. By the way, that's what we're gonna call this, as a self-closing custom component, is going to use a hook that expects us to put this component in suspense. Next.js needs this to happen. That's why we do it, right? And that's already it. That's the page content. All of the rest of the logic here will be handled client-side inside of this thank you component, and that we need to wrap in a suspense in order for it to use the hook that we will need. So also inside of our thank you folder, let's create the thank you .tsx component that's going to handle all the logic as to what's displayed on this page. So as always, let's close out of the sidebar. Let's create the thank you component, which is nothing more than an arrow function that we export default at the bottom. Thank you. Great. And we're also going to declare this as a client-side component at the very top with the use client directive to opt out of the server side that it is by default. And because we created and exported the component, we can already import it in our page.tsx. And why is that giving us an error, by the way? Thank you cannot be used as a JSX component. Its type void is not a valid. Okay, that's probably, yep, because we didn't return anything yet. That's fine. We're gonna do that. So what do we want to return from this component is the question. And basically, let's take a look at how this will work conceptually, this thank you page, right? The thank page. How will this work? There are basically going to be 3 states that we need to handle in this component. The first one is that we are loading the order data from our database, right? It's going to be a loading state, which means we're asking our database, is this order already paid or not, right? We don't have an answer yet. The second state that the order could be in is not paid, which means the user is done on the Stripe checkout page and they have already been forwarded to our thank you page, but Stripe has not yet sent us the webhook. Right, the webhook has not yet been called. So the Stripe checkout window, it doesn't close when the payment actually has been received. It closes before that, right? The webhook is sent along with the user exiting the Stripe checkout page. That's important to understand, right? The user will exit the checkout page to our thank you page, and already be redirected without necessarily, this can happen, but it doesn't have to, without the webhook already having been called. So these happen at the same time, which means we can't rely on the webhook already having been called when the user arrives at the thank you page. It's not this order, not first webhook, then thank you page. No, it happens at the same time, which means we need to get the status of our database on the thank you page to ensure that the user has in fact paid or not paid, right? That's a possibility as well if they land on the thank you page before the webhook has finished executing. And then the third state, of course, is the one that we want, the ideal state. That's eventually going to happen, that the user actually paid, that our database was updated. So both the thank you page, the user was actually forwarded, and the webhook also succeeded. In that case, we get the paid state, right? So these are the 3 states that we need to handle on this thank you page. And the question now, of course, becomes, how do we know which state that the page is currently in? And for that, that's actually pretty simple. We can simply destructure const empty object something from use query. Now, use query comes from TanStack React query, and it basically allows us to query some action, something from our database, once this page loads, right? On page load, we're immediately going to fire this automatically. And of course, as always, we're going to need to pass a query key in here. That's going to be our payment status, and let's actually call it get payment status. I think that's a good name for this. And then, of course, the query function, what should be executed? What are we searching for in our database? And as always, let's use my favorite pattern for this. Let's create a new file called the actions.ts. So you see the pattern, right? If we go into any other folder, we have the page, server side, the component, client side, the actions, also server side. I really like this pattern. I might just do a separate video on it. I'm a big fan, as you can tell from the project, right? Because it works very well. Now, inside of the actions, first thing, as always, let's define the use server directive so we can use it in our thank you component. And from these actions, let's export a const and call it get payment status. And for now, we can leave this as an arrow function that literally does nothing, just so we can already get rid of these arrows here because they look kind of bad, right? And so we're already going to go ahead and import the get payment status action in our thank you page. And of course, this is going to be an asynchronous function that calls the await get payment status just like so. And okay, this is not asynchronous. So we're getting a little mark here. Await has no effect on the type of this expression because this is a synchronous function. So we need to mark it here as asynchronous, right? So we can actually await it. And now let's already return some basic div from here, just so the error in the page.tsx also goes away. That complaint that we didn't return anything, right? So what is the logic that we want to handle right here for the thank you page? Basically, we need to determine the current state. What are we in, right? So inside of here, first off, we need the logged in user to check their orders, right? If the user is not logged in, they're not allowed to interact with our database. Very important, right? And to get the current user, we can destructure the get user function from get kind server session, or function we can always call on the server side to get the currently logged in user provided to us by kind. And now to get the actual user object, let's say const user is equal to await get user. So an asynchronous operation that reads the cookies that are passed to this API call, which under the hood, this is just a post request to an actual HTTP endpoint, it's just kind of abstracted into this syntax with the use server and so on, right? But under the hood, of course, this is an actual API that runs server side. It's just generated for us. And if we don't have a user.id, and the user in this case is optional, so we need to put a question mark, it might not exist, or we don't have a user.email, in this case, we don't need to put the question mark because we already put it here. And if this condition fails, then this one won't even be evaluated. That's just an interesting side note, by the way, on just kind of how the execution logic for an if statement works if we have the OR operator. So in this case, when we don't have an ID or the user email, we're going to throw a new error saying you need to be logged in to view this page, period. Great, and right below this, we will actually query our database for this order in order to get the status. So we're going to say const order, the user order is going to be equal to await db, let's import our database to interact with it, .order.find first. Now, what's the condition that we want to search by? We specify that in the where clause in Prisma, where the ID is equal to, well, what? What should it be equal to? Of course, we don't really know just from this function. It depends on what the thank you component was called with as a URL parameter, right? Because if you take a look at this, we pass the order ID as a query parameter to our page. Therefore, we should also get that query parameter from the page and pass it into our action, of course, as a argument whenever we call it, and receive it as a parameter right here in our get payment status. We need to receive the order ID that is passed in from our page, and this order ID, to tell TypeScript what it is going to be of type string, just like that. And receiving it in this function means we can now use it in our where clause for the order where we find it, and also where the user ID matches the currently logged in user.id. So we're only searching for orders that the currently logged in user owns, right? That's also important. And we're going to say include, which basically under the hood does an SQL join for us, just in kind of Prisma syntax. We're going to include the billing address. Let's get some autocomplete going here. That's going to be true. We're also going to include the configuration. Let's say true for that as well. Then the shipping address, we also want to grab that. And by the way, the reason we grab all of these is to now display them to the user on our thank you page, just so you know. And lastly, we also want the user true. So basically, we join these four tables together with the actual order table, and that's all that really happens here. And if we don't have an order like that, this could be undefined or null, I guess, same thing, right? It doesn't exist in our database. Prisma couldn't find it. In that case, we're going to throw a new error that says this order does not exist, period. Great. And now, if the order, order.isPaid, and let's scroll down a bit so you can see this easier. If the order is paid, in that case, we're going to return the order. Else, if the order is not yet paid, in that case, we're going to return false. And this statement is really important because it now allows us to poll this function, to poll our database under the hood from our thank you component, which is really important. So just like in the auth callback, we need to go for a polling approach here, where we pass a retry property of true, telling Tanstack React Query that it should keep retrying until nothing is thrown from this function, right? That's very important. If the order exists, only then do we stop retrying to get this order. And we can also specify the retry delay. In our case, I think 500 is a good balance to strike between spamming our database and between actually getting the user the results they're looking for pretty damn fast. All right. Now, the get payment status obviously complains that it still needs to receive the order ID. Where does this order ID come from? Well, as I just talked about, we pass it into the page as a query parameter, remember? Which also means we can now simply get it from, let's say, const search params, and that's going to be equal to use search params, a hook that we get from next/navigation, and simply invoke that. We get the order ID from the search parameters, of course, and to use them client-side, this is the hook we need. And this hook is also the reason why in our page.tsx, we wrap this entire thing in a suspense boundary, right? When grabbing these states here, these are based on the order ID that we can only grab using this hook. Now we could also do the server side. Yes, you could also get the order ID server side in the page component, as we did before, right? That's totally fine as well. In this case, grabbing them client side where we also query or backend also makes sense. And then we can simply grab the order ID from the search params. These are going to be equal to the search params.get, which is a really helpful function we can just call on the search params. And now we can pass in the name of the search param that we're looking for. In our case, that's the order ID. All right, so let's pass that in here. Or we're going to default this to an empty string if this doesn't exist. If there is no order ID, in that case, we're going to default it to an empty string. So in any case, it is a string that we can poll, right? And if it's an empty string, of course, the polling won't work. It will keep throwing, but that's fine. It will still like do what it's intended to do, right? And to get the result of our get payment status, we can simply destructure the data from our use query. That's going to contain whatever is returned from our server side function. Whatever is returned right here is going to be the type of our data on the front end, which is really nice. So we get full stack type safety. And now we can handle each of these states separately. First, let's do the loading state. And to know when we're loading, we can simply do an if check. If the data is triple equal to undefined, in that case, we are actually loading and we can return some JSX from here. Now the data will always be defined if we got any kind of response from our action, right? Unless we threw beforehand, that's totally fine, right? But if the order is paid or not, if we got to this point, then it will be either the order object or it will be false, but not undefined. So this is actually just the loading state and not any of the other states already included here. Now, what are we going to return? First off, a div element. This div is going to get a class name, and that's going to be a width of full. Let's pass it a margin top of 24, flex, and justify center. There we go. Let's open this div up, and inside of here, one more div. And this div will get a class name, and that's going to be flex, flex-call, items-center, and a gap of 2. And inside of this div, let's open that one up. We're going to put a loader 2 element or icon rather from Lucid React or icon library. And this one will get a class name of height 8, a width of 8, an animate spin to actually make it spin around, and lastly a text zinc, not zonk, of 500 to give it like a nice kind of gray shade. Below the loader, let's create an h3, a heading 3 element. This is going to get a class name of font semi-bold and also text XL for extra large, saying loading your order ... to kind of indicate the current loading state. And lastly, a p tag that's gonna say this won't take long, period, to kind of inform the user what is going on. Now, that's the loading state handled. Beautiful. We now know about the loading state. Now let's handle the not paid state, right? If whatever we get back from our server-side function is false, which means the order is not yet paid, the webhook from Stripe has not yet been executed successfully, so we're not 100% sure that the user actually gave us the money, that they actually paid as verified by Stripe. So in that case, we want to display also a loading state, but not like this loading state, but informing them that we're checking their payment, that it's being verified, right? So if the data is triple equal to false, in that case, we're still waiting for the webhook to update our database. So basically we can copy over the same structure that we have in the loading state and just change the text to inform the user what's actually going on here. So let's just copy this over. And of course, we also need to return that in this if statement. And let's change the h3 text to be verifying your payment ... And then in the p tag, instead of this won't take long, chances are this might take like 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever, how long it takes for Stripe to call our webhook endpoint. So in this case, we're going to say this might take a moment ... or period, I guess. Beautiful. And that's literally already it. That's both the loading state handled. That's the not yet paid, I think is a better way to put it. And the not yet paid. And then the last thing is the ideal case, the happy path, which is the payment case, right? The user has actually paid. We know everything is all right. So let's handle that happy path. So first off, to handle it, we're going to need access to some data that we destructure from, well, the data. All right. And what do we want to destructure from here? Basically, some configuration. We care about the configuration. Then the billing address we care about. Then the shipping address we care about to display both of these to the user. And lastly, we care about the amount. How much did it cost the user to order this product? And what we also want access to is the color of the phone case that the user ordered. And that's going to come from the configuration that we destructured right above here. So we can use it to actually display their real color phone as a kind of preview with their image. And it's just a nice detail. You know, in some cars, when you drive them around, and then on the infotainment screen, you have the actual car model, like literally in the same color as your kind of thing on the dashboard. My car doesn't have it, by the way. I think only the more luxury cars have it. But that's just a really nice attention to detail where the right color is used in the demo. And basically, we're going to do the same thing right here in our app. Just a funny side note, I guess, just a little tangent. Anyways, the top level div that we're going to return is going to get a class name of BG white, a white background. Now inside of here, let's create one more div. In this one, we'll get a class name of MX auto, a maximum width of 3XL, a padding X of 4, a padding Y of 16, on small devices, a padding X of 6, on small devices, a padding Y of 24, and on large devices, a padding X of 8. Awesome, let's open this one up. And inside of here lives one more div with a class name, and that class name is going to be maximum width of XL for extra large. Awesome. Inside of this div, let's create, and by the way, we can save all of our pages, the page.tsx, the thank you component, and the actions. And if we now reload our thank you page, we should actually be able to see what happens. Loading your order. Great. This won't take long. Because we're in localhost, this will take long, but in production, of course, it will not. And then currently, the order is actually paid, which means our Stripe webhook worked. Awesome, we saw that before. But currently, we're not displaying anything in the state, right? And let's do that. Inside of the maximum width XL div, let's create an H1 element. And this is going to say, thank you, exclamation point, for your order. The class name is going to be a text of base, a font dash medium, and a text primary. And if you're wondering what this is, this basically just applies the primary color that we have set in our globals.css, so with Shatsy and themes that we defined. Below this is going to live a p tag, and that's going to say as the class name margin top 2, a text of 4XL, a font of bold, a tracking dash tight, and on small devices, a text of 5XL. And let's save that and see what happens. If my PC was faster, we would already see it here on the right hand side. There we are. Thank you. And inside of this p tag, by the way, we forgot to say something here. Let's say your case is on the way, exclamation point, and also save that. And by the way, I just noticed these H1 and P's don't make sense. And the reason the text is so small is that I made a typo. It should be text 4XL. The thing is, if we save this, you're going to notice that this part is way larger than this part. So how about we just switch around the P tag with the H1 tag? I think just visually that makes a lot more sense. Now, could you put all of this in a div? Yes, you can. Should you? Probably not. That's just pretty bad semantic HTML. Not like many people are going to care anyways, but I want to teach you how to do it properly, you know. Awesome. And then below the H1, let's create a p tag saying we've received your order and are now processing it, period. And this p tag will also get a class name, and that class name is going to be a margin top of 2 as well, a text base, and a text zinc of 500. There we go. And then hit save. That's just going to be a pretty subtle color. There we are. We've received the order and are now processing it. Great. That is very, very nice. And now below the two p tags right here on the same level, let's create a div element with a class name that's going to be margin top 12, text small, font medium. There we go. And inside of this div, let's create a p tag with a class name of text zinc 900. And inside of this p tag, we're going to say order number. And let's create one more p tag right below this. And this is going to contain the actual order number. So the order ID, the identifier we get from our database. And this p tag with the order ID inside of it will get a class name of margin top 2 and a text zinc of 500 as well. So the same kind of subtle shade of gray that we had on the p tag above. Great, order number, and then it says the actual order ID. So if a user has any kind of support needs for their order, they can always include the order number, and then we know in our database which order that is, what their email is, and so on. So it's always really helpful to give the user any kind of identifier access for their order. So in case anything goes wrong with the order or something, we always know how to identify it. Beautiful. Let's create a element with 2 more closing divs to go. That's where we are. Let's create 1 more div. And this div is going to get a class name that is going to be margin top 10, a border of t, and lastly a border zinc of 200. And this is going to be like a visual separator, this top border. Inside of here, 1 more div with a class name, and that's going to be margin top of 10 as well, a flex dash auto, and lastly a flex dash call. And inside of here is going to live an h4 element, a heading 4, so a much smaller kind of heading in which we're going to say you made a great choice, exclamation point. And this h4 is going to get a class name of font semi-bold and also a text zinc of 900 as well. Beautiful. And now right below this h4, let's create another p tag. And this one is going to get a class name that's going to be margin top 2, a text of small, and a text zinc of 600. So 1 shade of gray darker than the others. And then here, we're going to say, we at Case Cobra believe that a phone case doesn't only need to look good, but also last you for the years to come. Period. We offer a 5-year print guarantee if your case isn't of the highest quality. Replace it for free. Period. Now, do you have to type exactly this text? Of course not, right? This is just something that I made up. If you named your project differently, or if you want to highlight some different cool aspect of your SaaS that you're launching, or not really SaaS, of your shop that you're launching here, this is the place to do that. All right, this is just something that I came up with, and I think it works pretty well. There we go. Okay, I was about to say that doesn't work pretty well if the spacing is off, but sometimes Next.js development locally takes a bit, at least on an old PC. But I don't need to tell you. I talked about it too often in this video already. Okay, so with 1 closing div to go and then 2 closing div, let's open this up, and then we have 2 more closing divs until the end. That is where we are right now, and that is where we're going to create a div element right here. And this div will get a class name of flex, of space x6, of overflow hidden, margin top 4, rounded XL, BG gray 900/5, so a very kind of light opacity on it, a ring of 1, a ring dash inset, a ring gray 900/10, so a very light opacity as well. And lastly, on large devices, we're going to give it a rounded of 2XL, 2 extra large. Let's open this up, and inside of here is going to live a really cool component, and that's going to be basically a phone, but not the phone component we already have, not this one, but one where a person has a phone in their hand and we apply the user image to it, basically a very realistic preview of what the phone could look like, the actual phone case, if someone held it in their hand that the user configured. How cool is that? And that phone case preview is going to live inside of its own custom component, and that's going to be, let's name it the phone preview.tsx, and create that. Great. Now, once again, the phone preview is nothing else than a regular arrow function that at the very bottom we can say export default phone preview. Great. And now, very important that this is also marked as a client-side component by use client, adding that directive at the very top, because we're going to make use of some client-side React hooks in here. Now, the question is, what do we need inside of this component as props in order to properly display a phone exactly as the user has configured it, basically? And imagine this, the phone, what do we need in order for this to look like the user made it? 2 things. First off, the user image. Right, let's name it the image, exactly how the user cropped it and where they positioned it. Very important that this looks like the user phone. And then secondly, imagine like it was bottom and then right side, how the user configured it. That's exactly where we need it to be right now as well. And then the color, right? If the user had a red phone, let's make the background red, then of course this phone should also be red. Or if they had a like black phone, then this should be black in the actual phone preview, right? So we need two things, the image and the color of the phone. So let's grab them as props, very easy. Let's get the cropped image URL and let's also get the color. And now we can inline this type because it's not very long. We can simply define the cropped image URL as a string, and we can also accept the color. There we go. And these are gonna be, if we take a look at our Prisma schema, well, we already have the colors right here defined as an enum, right? The valid colors. How can we grab this as a TypeScript type? Because Prisma always gives us the TypeScript types. Let's try it. Let's go for case color. Can we import that? Oh, this works. Okay. Oh, that I actually didn't. I'm gonna be real with you. I didn't know that worked. So what I did in the demo project was $enums that we get from Prisma .case color. So that's how I did it. That's really cool that this actually just, wow, I didn't know that. All right, dude, I learned something new every day as well. That's awesome. And let's just use the case color. That's much easier. Great. All right, and the first thing that we want to do in this component is define a state. And that will be the rendered width of the phone, because how large we want the image to be on this page is going to be very determined by how large the page is rendered on the user device. Right? It's very important. We need to know about it. So let's define a state and name it the rendered width, which will be in pixels. How large is this phone on the user device, whatever that might look like, right? On PC, on desktop, on phone, whatever the user is using, doesn't matter. The rendered width will be the correct value in pixels. And then also the set rendered width. And that's already it. We can simply destructure those from the useState React hook. And let's by default pass an object into this useState hook where the height is gonna be 0 and also the width is gonna be 0. So these are just gonna be the default values that we're gonna change later on. And now, because we're gonna need to know how this is rendered out on the user device, this is gonna be very similar as to how we saved the image earlier in the video. Do you remember what we used to do that? It was a ref. So we're gonna make use of a ref, a reference to a certain DOM node in this component as well. We're gonna say ref is equal to use ref, which is just another React hook we can import. And to tell TypeScript what this ref will point to in the DOM, this is gonna be an HTML div element we can pass in here as a generic. And also let's default this to null, because once this component first renders, the DOM node is not going to be linked or referenced, I guess, to this ref yet. Okay, now let's return the JSX from this component. At the top level, this will return our aspect ratio component from UI aspect ratio. This will take our ref. This is what we care about, right? This will be the actual phone, how it will be displayed. So we're gonna pass our ref into here. And then we can also define the ratio. And the ratio is going to be 3000 divided by 2001. Where do these come from? Well, these are basically the dimensions of the image that we're gonna use for our phone that I prepared in Photoshop. So that's just no magic numbers. That's where I got them from. And then the class name is going to be relative on the aspect ratio. Perfect. Let's open this aspect ratio up, and inside of here is going to live a div element. And this div is gonna get a class name that's gonna be absolute, a z index of 20, and a scale, and that's going to be a custom value in angle brackets, a 1.0352. Very specific value. I got it through trial and error, and this will basically make sure that the background we're going to display in this div, in a second here's an image, will actually never exceed the actual phone dimensions, right? So if we display the image kind of right here, then it will never be bigger than the phone. That's basically what we ensure with the scale. So I just did some trial and error. That's it. It's also not a magic number. This just kind of works. Beautiful. Let's add a style property on this div as well, and that will be an object. This style will take two things. First off, the left property. And now this will get interesting. This is going to be the rendered width. And actually, you know what? We have both the height and the width in the state. So rendered width doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I just noticed that. Let's call this rendered dimensions instead. So let's kind of improvise here on the fly. I think this is a much better name. And we want to write good code. And that's just a much better name because it doesn't only contain the width. Otherwise, it could just be a number, and you know that would not make sense. So for the left property, we're gonna pass in here as a style. We're gonna use the rendered dimensions dot width divided by 2. Basically, what that's gonna do is take the image, right? So this is gonna be. Let me show you the image that we're gonna use here. That's in our public folder under, where is it? It should start with C. There it is. It's the clearphone.png. It's basically a transparent image of a person holding a phone, right? So imagine that this white image is the entire composition, right? With the person kind of holding their hand being, well, I'm very bad at drawing, but imagine they're holding their hand kind of like this, I guess, you know, and the phone is right here. I don't know, looks horrible, but you get the idea. Right, so this is gonna, man, let's copy this over. There we go. Let's get rid of that. This is gonna be the entire image. There we go. And basically what we want to do is to take the user image and move it over the phone that the person has in their hand, right? And that's basically, if we take a look at this, that's basically the center of the image. So what this means, the rendered dimensions dot width divided by 2, is that we're taking the user image that's gonna be contained in this div right here and moving it right here, so the left edge is on the 50% line of the screen, right? So it's a bit too far to the right because the left edge aligns, and we want it to be right here. We want it to be center and not left edge center, right? Therefore, not only this, but also minus, so to the left, we're gonna shift it by the rendered width, or rendered dimensions is what we call it, dimensions dot width divided by, and now in parentheses, 1216 divided by 121, and that should be divided. Oh, I switched my keyboard to English. There we go. So divided by 121. How did I figure these numbers out? Basically, it kind of depends on the image that you're working with, but I measured how large is the phone, how is it displayed on our page, and then through a bit of trial and error, I came up with this ratio right here, where this is the kind of width of the phone, and this is the offset on the image. And doing that, we actually move our phone from, let's zoom in a bit, from the left edge is in the center to it needs to be to the exact position that it needs to be in on the page. However, currently it would literally be here at the very top in the right position x-wise, but not y-wise, because we haven't given this a top property yet. So as the top property right here, we're also going to give it a rendered dimensions dot height divided by 6.22, and again the process is kind of trial and error in Photoshop, where I measured the element and I put a lot of work into this component, and this took me quite a bit to figure out, and then this is the ratio that I eventually came up with. And the important thing about why we are using ratios instead of pixels is that as we resize the image, however it is kind of sized in the user browser, the elements go, like they get larger and smaller with how large it's displayed on the user browser, right? That's very important. If this was fixed pixels, then as we drag this around, well, the content would not scale, right? That would be horrible. And that's why we use ratios and not pixels. So it's much better. The image we're going to put in here is going to be the actual user image finally, right? And the width of this image is going to be equal to the rendered width, rendered dimensions is what we call dimensions dot width, and now divided by, and then in parentheses, 3000 divided by 637. Once again, the process for coming up with these was in Photoshop, kind of measuring stuff, doing a bit of trial and error, and eventually I found these ratios that work really well to always keep the image exactly where it should be. And we can just use those because I've already done the trial and error work for us. Great. This class name is going to be, for the image element, a phone-skew, which is a custom class we will create in a second, a relative, a z-index of 20, a rounded top of 15px as a custom value, a rounded bottom of 10 pixels as a custom value. Then on medium devices, we're going to say rounded top of 30px as a custom value, and also on medium devices a rounded bottom of 20 pixels instead of 30 as a custom value. So we're left with rounded top 15, rounded bottom 10, medium, rounded top 30, medium, rounded bottom 20. And now, because this image element will cover the entirety of the phone that is held in this picture, so that's going to be this phone right here, it's going to cover the entire section. We also want to apply the actual color that the user chose, and let's open up this page, the actual color that the user chose for their phone, right? And I agree, like, while we're doing this all seems a bit abstract, but trust me, once we get done with this and save the file, this is gonna look really, really good. And you're gonna see that here in a minute, once we get done with this. So in order to apply the user color, we're gonna grab the class name and cut it. Don't worry, we're gonna put it back, but we're gonna make the class name dynamic with our cn helper function and import that. And then simply leave this as the default name, but we're also gonna merge this with something called the case background color. Now, of course, this doesn't exist, the case background color, but what we do already have access to is the color that the phone was configured with as a prop into the phone preview component, right? So what we can simply do is a little check. We can say let case background color is equal to bg zinc of 950 as a string by default, right? And if the color is triple equal to blue, in that case, we're simply going to set the case background color to bg blue of 950. There we go, as easy as that. And now we can press Shift, Alt, and arrow down, copy this if statement down, and slightly change this where if the color is rose, in that case, the case background color is simply going to be bg rose of 950, or any other color that you support, right, that you define for your phones. And then we simply dynamically merge it with the existing class name right here. And lastly, this image also takes a source, and that for us is going to be the cropped image URL that is also passed as a prop into this component. Beautiful, that's gonna be the user image rendered out. Now the last thing we need to do, very simple, is actually display the background image as well, the clear phone.png, and we're gonna do that right above or closing tag for the aspect ratio. This is where a div is gonna live with a class name that's gonna be relative, a height of full, a width of full, and a z-index of 40. Inside of here, let's create an image element. This can be self-closing. This must be self-closing actually. The alt tag is going to be phone. The source is going to be as a string / clear phone.png. What I opened up right here, that's this image. And then lastly, as the class name for this image element, we're gonna pass pointer events none, a height of full, a width of full, an anti-aliased hard word, and a rounded of medium. There we go. Let's save all of our files. We can close out of some of these, and then let's see what pops up here on our thank you page, because chances are it's almost gonna look perfect. But let's reload the page, loading your order. This won't take long. On localhost, sometimes it will. And oh, did we not import this component? Yeah, we didn't. All right, we forgot to import our phone preview component. Oh, well, of course, it's not going to show up. Let's render out our phone preview component in our thank you component. And of course, this expects to take two things, which is the cropped image URL, and this is going to be equal to our configuration.cropped image URL. And we can simply pass this an exclamation point to tell TypeScript, don't worry about it, this will exist. And the color is simply gonna be the color, and also put a little exclamation point there. And we know we can put these exclamation points because all of these infos, even though yes, in the database they're optional, we know that we already set them in step 2 of the configuration process, which is far done when we get to this page. So they will be set in any case, right? We can save that. And now let's see what happens. Let's restart the page, and you're gonna see something very cool pop up here on the right. And that is, well, it almost works. It kind of works. We can see the background image is already there. The clear phone, that is awesome. Something that doesn't work yet properly is displaying the image, the user image. And we're gonna get to why here in a second. Or actually, no, let's do it right now. I mean, dude, it doesn't work. Let's fix it. Why is this happening? Well, because we never actually set the rendered dimension of the image. We have assigned the reference to the DOM node right here, the aspect ratio, but we're never actually updating the rendered dimension, and it's set to width and height of 0. So the user image is literally 0 pixels high and wide, right? So it won't be visible to anyone. Therefore, let's put a use effect into our component, and this is going to be a very simple kind of implementation that we're going to write here. Basically, let's define a function. Let's say const handle resize, and that's just going to be an empty arrow function for now, above our use effect, so we can already get started in using it in our use effect. By the way, let's pass in dependency array into our use effect, and this is going to run every time the ref dot current changes. When our DOM node link is actually established, that is when this function inside of our use effect is going to run. Now, what do we want to execute here? The handle resize, and simply call that. And now we also want to fire this function not only by default on the first render or when the reference changes, but also when the window is resized by the user to refresh how large the user image should be, to always maintain the perfect kind of ratios, right? Therefore, we're going to say window.add event listener. We're going to listen to the resize event, just like so. And we're going to pass the handle resize as the handler for that event. So whenever the user resizes their window, this function will get called. And of course, to avoid memory leaks from our function or from our component, we're going to return the window.remove event listener and pass it the same thing. We're going to listen to the resize event and also the handle resize as the listener or the handler for that event, right? So if this component unmounts, we clean up after ourselves, which is really important. Great. Now the handle resize currently doesn't do anything, right? We can call this all we want. It doesn't do anything. So let's fix that. Basically, if we don't have a ref.current in our handle resize, let's return. And with this guard clause, that's what this is called, in place, we can now assume that the ref.current exists and simply destructure. Let's worry about the destructuring later from the ref.current.getBoundingClientRect. You're already familiar with this function from the previous implementation, so you already know what this gives us. A bunch of really useful properties like the width and also like the height of how this component is rendered out in the user browser, right? No matter which device they're using, no matter how high or wide it is, it's always going to be this one right here. We can rely on that. And now simply set the rendered width to exactly that width, and the height we destructure from the getBoundingClientRect. And of course, that should be set rendered dimensions. We kind of switch that out. I think it's a much better way to name things. And set rendered dimensions. There we go. Now that's going to recognize the function. We can set that. And if we save this, then this effect will almost be done. Right, and we're very close to this being done. So let's reload this, loading your order. Now the user element will actually be resized properly. And well, nice, that's good. It's in the right position, but it doesn't look perfect yet. The user image is kind of off, right? It's not tilted in the same way as the phone. And to fix that, that's actually exactly what this phone skew property is for, that we're gonna create right now ourselves in our globals .css. So basically the goal here is to match the skew and the perspective of the phone, how it is held in this image, right? And doing that in plain CSS is actually pretty simple. We're gonna define a custom class called phone-skew, exactly how we use it in our component. and simply apply a transform property on here, which is going to be perspective of 400 px, then a rotate y of 3 degrees, a skew x, and the skew is basically, imagine if you had a rectangle, then you move the right side to the right, but you move the top side to the left. So it's kind of, if I have to draw this, it gets kind of more like this. I mean, that looks really bad, but imagine this happens, right? From this to this, I think you get the idea. That's what the skew x is for, and this is going to be 11.1 degrees. And lastly, the skew y, which basically does the same thing, but for the y-axis, that we're going to apply, is going to be minus 10.9 degrees. Hit save, let's reload our page, and we're going to see, wow, that looks a lot better. It actually looks like the user image is right on the phone that they are holding. And why is that not working? Did we phone dash skew and we defined the phone dash skew? Why that? Well, that should work. Let's reload again. Why is that not working? Oh, and I just did some debugging and it seems like there's a typo somewhere. Yeah, we missed the degrees. Okay, so it says invalid property value. That's why it's not applied properly. And that will be because we forgot the degrees at the very end right here for the skew y. And then CSS is like, whoa, what is going on? I don't know what's happening. I can't apply this, but if we fix that to degrees, then you're gonna notice, wow, this looks like it's actually on the phone exactly how the user configured it, in the color as the user configured it, as a really clean, really nice preview of the actual user configuration. Very, very nice. And let's close out of the globals.css file. And we're pretty good progress on the thank you page. So now what we want to do is to also display the shipping and billing address as well as the payment status to the user as kind of the last thing on the thank you page, right? The most important part is this one, but this is also important and because the user expects these kinds of information to be on the shipping page. So it would be pretty bad to just kind of forget it, right? That would not be good on the summary kind of thank you page. So below the div that surrounds our phone preview with 2 closing divs to go, let's create one more div. This one won't get any class name, so let's open it up. And inside of here lives one more div element. This one will get a class name, and that's gonna be grid calls of 2, a gap x of 6, a padding y of 10, and a text of small. Perfect, let's open this div up. Let's give this a tad more space to work with. And inside of this div, let's put one more div. This will just serve as an element to be the top of the grid. So it's also not gonna get a class name, but in here is gonna be a, something with a class name, let me tell you. So in here is gonna be a p tag, right? And this p tag is going to get a class name, and that's going to be a font medium, and it's going to be a text gray of 900. And inside of here, we're going to say shipping address. So you can probably guess what comes next. It's going to be a div containing the shipping address. This div will get a class name, and that's going to be a margin top of 2 to kind of space it out, and also a text zinc of 700. Let's open this div up, and in here will live the address. And if you didn't know, there's actually an HTML address field that we're going to use for this. Inside of this address field, we can simply create a span element, and we're also going to pass a class name into this address saying not italic. And if you hover over this, you can see font style normal, because by default, this will be italic, and that's not what we want. So inside of the span, let's give this a class name of block. And the content of this is going to be the shipping address question mark dot name, just like so, just to make TypeScript happy, because if we didn't have that question mark, TypeScript would be like, hey, where is that? Like, that could be optional. Maybe the name doesn't exist, and it would complain, and we don't want that. So let's copy this span down using Shift, Alt, and arrow down once and twice. And the second span is going to get the shipping address dot street. And the last span element, the third one, is going to get 2 things. First off, the shipping address dot postal code. And also, don't forget the question mark here. There we go. Did I misspell this? Yeah, postal code. And then right behind that, still in the same span element, the shipping address question mark to make it optional dot city. There we go. If we save this, we might already see what this looks like here once localhost is done rendering. There we are. And why is that still italic? There we go. It just kind of fixed itself. Dude, yeah, I'm really looking forward to my new PC that is faster. It's just sometimes a bit annoying to have stuff like that on localhost where you think, hey, why is it not working? But it actually is working. It's just localhost not really catching up, you know? Anyways, let's copy down this div right here that is inside the grid, the top level div, one more time to display the billing address. So we're going to copy it down using Shift Alt arrow down. Bam. There we go. And we're going to change it from the shipping address to the billing address. And similarly, of course, we're going to change everything here using Control D. Mark the first one, press Control D a couple of times, and you mark all occurrences of the shipping address and replace those with the billing address just like so. Beautiful. Okay, if we save them, if we save the file, that's what I mean, these will be displayed side by side. So this looks really, really nice. And lastly, below the closing address with 1 closing div, 2 closing div, 3 closing div, that is where we're going to open up. So with 3 more closing divs to go, this is where we're going to create 1 more div. And this one is going to get a class name of grid, a grid calls of 2, a gap x of 6, a border t, a border zinc of 200, a padding y of 10, and a text of small. Let's open this div up, and inside of here, 1 more div element, again as the kind of top level of the grid. So this will take up 1 grid column, whatever is in here. And in here, we're gonna put a p tag. There we go. That's gonna say payment status, and this p tag is going to get a class name of font medium and a text zinc of 900. There we go. Below this p tag, just like so, we're gonna create 1 more p tag, and this will get a class name that is margin top 2 and a text zinc of 700. So a bit less intense than the one above it. And inside of this p tag, we're gonna say paid. Because why are we hard coding this? Because every time that this is visible to the user, this entire return statement is triggered, we already know that it's not unpaid, and we are also not loading. But in that case, we already know anything that is rendered out here, we already know that the user actually paid, that Stripe verified that we got the money. So we can simply hard code this here, and because this will always be the case if this is rendered, right? Beautiful. And then below this div element, we're gonna create 1 more div element, and basically it will be the exact same thing. So what we can also just do is grab this div containing the both p tags and replace this one we just created. So we have 2 under another with 4 closing divs after it. That's where we are, right? So the address, 3 closing ones, and then the section we are currently working in. And for the second one, we're going to change the payment status to the shipping method. And let's say inside of this p tag, DHL takes up to 3 working days. And hit save. Let's see what it looks like. There we are. Payment status paid. Shipping method DHL takes up to 3 working days. Beautiful. The absolutely last thing we're gonna do on this page is displaying the order price, right? How much did the user pay for this? Just as a nice kind of summary. And that's gonna happen. Let's give this a bit. That looks kind of weird, the formatting. There we go. So closing p tag, then a closing div, another closing div, and another closing div. So with 2 more closing divs to go, that is where we're gonna create 1 more div element. And this one is going to get a class name that's gonna be space y of 6, a border t, a border zinc of 200, a padding top of 10, and lastly a text of small. Let's open this div element up. Inside of here, 1 more div with a class name of flex and justify between. Let's open this one up, and inside of here lives a p tag with a class name of font medium and a text zinc of 900 saying subtotal. And we can just copy this p tag down using Shift Alt arrow down and change the class name to instead be a text zinc of 700. So again, a bit less intense than the one above it. And as the subtotal, we're going to use our format price utility function to always display the right currency for the amount that the user paid. What is the amount that the user paid? Well, we already know right here from our database, right? How much the user paid for this order. So we can simply use that amount in our format price function right here. Beautiful. Let's mark this div with the flex justify between and simply copy and paste it down once and twice using Shift Alt arrow down. As the second one, we're going to say shipping. And as the amount, we're just going to put 0 because we offer free shipping on our service. No problem. And of course, if you wanted to actually charge for shipping, then that would be the price that you charge for it. And of course, don't forget to also tell Stripe about it so it actually charges for it, right? But our service has completely free shipping. We're going to use 0. And then the total at last is going to be exactly the amount because shipping is 0, right? So amount plus 0 equals amount. We can save the thank you page, and that's going to display how expensive this was to the user. Subtotal, shipping, total, $14, and that is a beautiful thank you page if I've ever seen one. It shows the phone case with the exact user image, exactly how the user configured it. Your case is on the way with the order number we could use for any optional support request that the user could use, with the shipping method, the payment status it's paid, and when we reload this page, we also get a loading state for our order. That is very, very nice with the price. Great job. All right, dude. And one more little cut because for me, it's the next day again. And I just tested the entire checkout flow and it works very, very nice. We've got our little, well, that's what I just put on the phone. I know it looks silly, but whatever. Beautiful. So we are at like 10.5 hours of 12, which is awesome. That means we have done already most of the work, and it also means we're almost done with the entire project. Now, one thing I want to show you how to do is how to build the admin dashboard, right? Where we see who ordered from us so we can process the orders and so on. I feel like that's very, very important. And also that the user gets an email when they purchase from us, right? That's the second thing. During the checkout flow, I noticed one little thing, that's the loading state on one button missing. We're also going to fix that, of course. But for now, let's implement this dashboard. So when a user orders from us and we're logged in as the main admin user, well, okay, right now that logged us out. That of course shouldn't happen. If we're logged in as the main admin user, we should be able to access the admin dashboard and see all the incoming orders, right? So we can process them however we want by forwarding them to a processor or by printing the cases ourselves. It doesn't really matter as long as we handle them, right? Let's stay at this zoom level. Okay, so let's close out of all of the tabs and let's create this dashboard together. And it's going to live in our source folder under app, and then let's create a new folder called dashboard right in here. That's going to end up as the URL. And once again, for the actual content, we're going to define a page.tsx. Now, let's export a const page from here. Well, not export yet. Let's define it first and then export it at the bottom as the default from this file. Great. Now, inside of here at the first level, we're going to render out some div element. And this div element is going to represent the main wrapper for this dashboard component. And we're going to give it a flex, a minimum height of screen, a width of full, and a background -muted /40, which is like a built-in kind of color that our UI library actually gave us. And of course, we also need to return this div. And all that's doing with this top level div is if we now log in as the main admin user. So for me, that's going to be hello@joshtriedcoding.com. And by the way, again, how do we determine the admin user? That's going to be done with our admin email right here. If you remember, if we go into our navbar component, we are checking the isAdmin by the process.env.admin email. So this is the main site admin that's gonna, only this guy, only you on this email will be allowed to actually access the dashboard, right? Which is the entire point of securing this dashboard. So once we log in with our main, we can't offer a quick start a new session. Oh, that's weird. I'm not gonna cut that out because maybe that happens for you too. That is very weird that that happens. Okay, so let's try deleting our cookies and then trying again. That might have to do with the fact that I'm logged in on literally the other Chrome browser. So let's get rid of all of our cookies and try reloading the page. Let's click login, and if that doesn't work, then I'm gonna go ahead and log out on the other account. So let's try this again. Let's send an email that's gonna send us the code. And I mean, maybe you didn't even get that error. I've never got it before. That's weird. But it might be like a cookie inconsistency or something. Let's see if this works. Let's enter the code. Let's log in, and that did work. Beautiful. Okay, so that was like a once like an error that only happens once. English is hard, man. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyways, so we can see our dashboard button right here, but currently it logs us out, right? If you see the link, like at the very left bottom here, it says API auth logout. That is horrible. We don't want the dashboard button to log us out. Of course not, right? So what we're going to do in the dashboard is, instead of linking us to the API auth logout, this is going to take us to / the dashboard. Great. Now, this would be a very insecure kind of way of going about things, because yes, we're only showing the button to the actual admin, but anyone can go to / dashboard, right? Even if they don't see the button, if they know that the URL exists, they can currently see our secret dashboard page. Right, if we reloaded this, even in incognito mode or something where nobody's logged in, they would be able to see this very secret data that we want to show in here, like all the revenue and the incoming orders and the user details and so on. That's very, very bad. Now, how do we secure that? It's actually pretty simple, and it works very, very nicely. First off, we need to grab the currently logged in user in this dashboard page. And we already know how to do that, right? We can simply get something from the getKind server session, because this is a server-side component, right? This runs server-side because we did not use a use client directive at the very top, right? So don't put it here, by the way. I'm just showing this to you because it's important that this runs on the server side. Great. And now from here, we can destructure or get user function and simply grab the actual logged in user object by awaiting, is equal to await the get user, and simply invoking that function. And of course, in order to await this, we also need to mark this page component as asynchronous right here. Great. Next up, let's grab the admin email. Let's say const admin _ email in all caps is gonna be the process.env.admin _ email. There we go. And now let's do the important check, right? What's gonna differentiate between any random user trying to access this page and the actual admin. So if we do not have a user, if the user is not even logged in, or if the user.email is unlike the admin email, that's the bad case, right? In that case, this user is not authenticated to access this page. So we're gonna pretend this page doesn't even exist. In that case, we're gonna say return not found, which comes from /navigation right here. What are possible alternatives you could do? You could also use the redirect. I'm just showing this to you. You don't need to follow along. You could also use the redirect and simply send them back to the homepage if you want to. That's also perfectly valid. We're gonna stick with the not found. So they're going to think that this page doesn't even exist. There is no dashboard. Only when you're an admin are you actually able to even see this page in the first place. Perfect. Let's give this a bit more space and maybe we can zoom in a bit more. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Now, as for the actual content that's going to be shown on the dashboard, what is the main thing that we want to show? Well, the orders, right? Everything is going to depend on the orders in our database. Therefore, let's grab them, right? Let's say const orders is going to be equal to await db. Let's import our database helper .order.find many. So we're going to grab multiple orders in the server-side component. Now, this takes a where property, so which orders do we want to take, by which criteria, and we're gonna put the is paid to true, which means we're only gonna grab orders that are successfully paid. This is kind of personal preference. If you want to list all orders, you can simply ignore that, right? But I think it makes sense to only show the ones where we are sure that we actually have received the money. But again, if you want, you can just leave this away and you're going to see all orders, no matter if they're paid or not. And then the created at property right here is going to be an object. And we're going to say GTE inside of here, which means the created at property needs to be greater than or equal, right? So in JavaScript, that would be like this operator right here, greater than or equal, same thing as the GTE in Prisma. A new date that we're going to construct. And inside of here, we're going to pass a new date once again, dot set date. And we're going to set this date to once again a new date, dot get date -7. So essentially all this means is last week, right? Get me all the orders from the last week. That's why we have the 7 days right here. Perfect. And now right below the where clause, let's also order these entries that we get back from our database. So we're going to say order by, and we're going to order by the created at property in a descending order. So that means we're going to have the newest ones on top and then the oldest ones on the bottom. I think, or did I get it wrong? Like, is it the exact opposite? I always get confused between ascending and descending, but I think descending is newest first, oldest last. I think that's what it is. And then we're also going to say include. So basically we're going to join 2 tables on top of this. And first one is going to be the user. So we also get the user entry that made this order and also the shipping address. We're going to put to true as well. So we're going to join these 2 tables with the order that we're originally grabbing, right? Great. And we can almost get started with our JSX. One more very quick thing before we do, and that is let's quickly grab the sum of money or revenue that we made in the last week. To do that, we're going to say const last week sum is going to be equal to await db.order.aggregate, which is something we can call on the order. Provided to us by Prisma, and we can simply pass a where in here, and same thing, we're going to pass the is paid true, and the created at basically same thing, right? Last week we can simply copy and paste this down, so the where clause is basically going to be the exact same as before. The only difference is that we're now going to say underscore sum, and that is an object. And now what do we want to aggregate on? Which property? That is the amount, right, of our orders. And we're going to set that to true because that's going to be the actual amount that the user paid, meaning that this last week's sum is now going to contain a underscore sum, which is going to contain the entire amounts from the last week that have actually been paid, verified by Stripe, right? And we can already get started with building out our page and actually seeing the results of the data that we just fetched. So let's do it. Let's create a second div inside of here. And this one will get a class name of maximum width 7XL, a width of full, an MX of auto, a flex dash call on small devices, a gap of 4. And there we go. It's not complaining anymore. And on small devices, a padding Y of 4 as well. Okay, let's open up this div and one more div in here. This one will get a class name, which is going to be flex dash call and a gap of 16. And let's open this one up and one last div in here. This one is going to get a class name of grid, a gap of 4, and on small devices, a grid calls of 2. All right, let's open up this div and I promise no more div in here. Inside of here is going to go something called the card component that currently doesn't really exist in our project because it is one that is provided to us by our UI library that we haven't installed yet. And it looks pretty nice out of the box and it's ideal for displaying the table that we're about to display, right? So basically all it is, it's like a simple wrapper with some padding and an outline applied to it. And it looks nice out of the box. It's not something like very groundbreaking or anything because it's just like a little div, I guess, with an outline and padding, but it looks kind of nice and we can simply add it to our project using the npx command right here. So let's open up a new terminal and let's say npx shadcn-ui at latest add card and then simply hit enter. That's going to install a bunch of stuff, this stuff right here into our own project, like the card content, card description. And that's the beautiful thing. Like, look at this API, right? We have the card header, the card content, and then also a footer if we want to. And we're going to make use of all of those. So let's see how to do it. First off, we can already import our card once that's done installing. And inside of this card, we're now going to put the card header first, just like in the documentation here on the right hand side, right? So let's go onto our page so we can see what we're doing in real time. And let's put the card header right on top as the first element in our card. And this will get a class name of padding bottom 2. Great. Let's open up the card header, and inside of here goes the card description. Let's import that also from our custom UI component that's in our own project. And this is going to say last week. So this is going to be the revenue overview for the last week. And to actually display the number, the revenue from the last week, we can simply grab the card title and put it right below our card description. This one is going to get a class name of text 4XL. We're going to make it pretty big. And inside of this card title, let's render out the actual revenue from the last week. And we already did the work for that, right? We already have the last week sum that we can now simply build on top of. Let's simply use our format price helper because we're going to display a price amount, a money amount. And in here, we're going to put our last week sum dot, and this now has a property called underscore sum provided by Prisma dot amount, which is nothing else than the where condition that we set, which is nothing else than the total revenue for the last week. And now let's do a nullish coalescence if this is undefined or null. In that case, we're going to display 0 right here to use as the input value for our format price function. And let's see what we just did. Let's save the page. Let's reload this one on the right hand side, and we're going to see what happens. There we go, $22. Perfect. Let's verify that that is true, right? We can simply say npx prisma studio to go, studio, there we go. We can simply go into our studio to see if that's true, right? Let's open up our studio here on the right hand side, and we expect to see one order inside of here because I recently cleared the database. So we're only going to have one order in here, and that order should be for $22. Perfect. Very, very nice. So we can see the revenue of the last week right here. And let's also give this some context. Let's define a goal for this, right? We can define this ourselves. Let's just go above our component, above the return statement, and let's define something called a weekly goal. Const weekly underscore goal is gonna be equal to, let's say, 500. So our goal is to make $500 per week with our store. And I think it's just kind of nice to have that in mind, so we can now use that in our card to actually put this number into context, right? So below our card title and below the card header, let's create the card content and simply import that as well from our UI library. And inside of here goes a div element with a class name that's going to be a text of small and a text muted foreground, which is also just a color that our UI library provides to us if we hover over this. And inside of this div, we're going to say of and then format price, or kind of money helper function, weekly underscore goal, the constant we have just defined, goal, right? So of $500 goal. Let's save that and see what happens. And while it loads, we can do something even more cool, arguably, and that's gonna happen. There we go, $22 of $500 goal. What if we now had like a little progress bar that showed the actual progress from $22 to our goal? I think that would be a very nice detail addition, and that's gonna happen inside of the card footer right here. And inside of here, we're going to use a component. And by the way, we also need to import the card footer. Now, for this to work, we also need to import the progress component right here that we already have in our project, because we also used it on the upload, right? The upload status to show that, remember? So we can just reuse this. This can be self-closing. And this takes only one thing, and that's going to be the value. So what the value is, basically, if we say 50, for example, let's see what happens. Let's reload our page. And that's gonna be how far the progress bar will be to the end. So 50 would be like literal half, 100 would be it's completely full, and 0 would be that the progress bar is actually empty, right? And now we want to set $22 in perspective to the $400 or $500 whatever goal, right? And the way we do that is simply by passing in the last week sum dot underscore sum dot amount, or 0 as nullish coalescence, right? If this is undefined or null, divided by our weekly underscore goal. So basically, how much is $22 or $500. Great, but that doesn't look very realistic because the progress bar should be filled up way more. Therefore, let's wrap the entire parentheses right here again in parentheses and then say times 100 at the end. Right, so if we pretend that the last week's sum.amount was 500, let's just try this out. In that case, we expect the progress bar to be full. So let's reload our page and see if it is full. Great, it is. If it was 250, so half of our goal, we would expect it to be at 50%. Let's verify that that is the case. And it is perfect. So we now know this calculation is accurate. And we can simply save this. Perfect. Now we have the actual progress to our goal. And we're going to do the same thing for the last month, right? I think that's also very interesting to include. Therefore, we can simply grab the entire card element and simply copy it down using Shift Alt arrow down. Bam, there we go. And that's going to be for the last month. Oops, last month in this case. And the logic to grab the sum for the last month is going to be basically the same as for the last week, right? We can also simply copy and paste that down and rename it and only change like the number right here. So let's name this the last month sum. There we go. And then the 7 we're going to change to a 30. So the last 30 days is going to be the last month. Now, is that incredibly accurate? Should you put this in a banking application with just hard coding 30 days? Probably not. Is this a good idea for us because it avoids a lot of complexity? Yes, it definitely is. So it's going to be the last 30 days and we're going to call it the last month. And that's just much easier than actually calculating like how many days did the month have and where are we in the current month and so on. If you want, that's a challenge for you to implement, but it adds completely unnecessary complexity for us right now. And now let's determine our monthly, there we go, underscore goal. And let's set this to, I don't know, 2,500 as the kind of revenue goal for this month, right? And that's already it. We can simply now use these values just like we did with the last week sum and replace the last week sum using Control D, by the way, to select both with the last month sum. And then put that into perspective into our monthly goal, right? And then hit save. Let's reload our page and see what happens. And there we go. Last month, $22 of $2,500 goal, but the status bar is filled up too much. That doesn't look realistic, right? It's the same for both, and that's because we forgot to divide by the monthly underscore goal and not put it into perspective to the weekly goal. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So the progress bar should be way lower than this because 22 of 2,500 is not that much. Yeah, there we go. That's much more realistic. Perfect. Very, very nice. Now let's actually display the incoming orders, right? So we can process them. That's going to happen below the closing div, below the closing card with 3 more closing divs to go. This is where we're going to create an H1 element that gets a class name, and that's going to be a text of 4XL, a font-bold, a tracking-tight, and that is already it. Let's open up this H1 element and say incoming orders, and let's already hit save. Now, what we're gonna use to display the incoming orders is gonna be, there it is, nice, is gonna be a table component. This doesn't make sense to render out in anything else except a table, right? This is how you display a long list of items that potentially are like hundreds and hundreds of elements, right? Hopefully, I hope your shop does that well. So it's hundreds and hundreds of elements, right? And we're going to display that inside of a table. And that's supported by our UI library with the table component that we're simply gonna use for this. It works very nicely out of the box. So let's install it. Let's say npx shadcn-ui at latest, add table, and then hit enter. This actually uses TanStack React table under the hood. It just kind of styles it. TanStack table. Let me show you that. So this is what shadcn actually uses under the hood. TanStack table, a headless UI for building powerful tables and data grids. It's a really good table. You know, that's just it. It's lightweight, and it has, wow, why did this just open? Wow, that was some horrible layout shift. Sorting, global filters, it supports a lot of stuff, and it's just really fun to work with. Basically also because of the API that we get to use to create this. And that API, let's see how clean it is. First off, we're going to create a table element from our UI table, right? Inside of here, we're going to create a table header, and we also need to import this from our UI library. And inside of the table header, we're gonna put a table row that we also need to import. There we go. And I mean, check this out. This API just makes sense, right? Table, then you have the header, then you have a row, and now we can kind of put in the row all the headings. So let me show you what we're doing right now. I think it's going to be a bit easier. So imagine if we have a table right here. Basically, it will have a bunch of columns, just like so. And what we're doing right now in this table header is going to be the text that's going to be like in the top right here, right? So I don't know, column 1, column 2. Of course, we're going to name it differently, but this is what we're doing inside of the table header, right? Just so you understand where we are right now. So inside of this table row, let's define the table head. Table head, there we go. That's how we define the column name. The first column is going to be named customer. Then let's copy and paste this down. The second one is going to be named status. That's going to be like, is it shipped or whatever. And this one is going to get a class name, and that's going to be hidden. And on small devices, we're going to give it a table-cell. There we go. And let's give this a bit more space. Let's copy and let's give this even more space. So this is one line. There we go. Let's copy and paste the status down. Bam. That one is going to say purchase date. So when did the order, or when did the customer make the order? And then the last one, let's copy and paste it down once again, but remove the class name and replace it with text-right. This is going to be the amount. There we go. And that's literally all the column names done, right? We can now actually go ahead and show the data. So let's already save this. Let's see what this looks like, but there won't be any data in here just yet because we haven't kind of implemented that part, but let's see what happens. There we are, customer and amount. And if we actually give this more space on desktop devices so we can process the order, we see all the information right here in our table. So let's actually go ahead and display the orders. Let's fill this table, right? That's going to happen below our table header. Inside of the table, well, you can probably guess the body, right? Just like with CSS, you have header and body. Same thing in the table API, and I really find that very intuitive. Inside of the table body, we can now simply map over our orders. We're going to say orders.map. So for each order that we receive in the callback function, we're going to return some JSX right away. So we're going to open this up in plain parentheses. And from here, we're going to return a table row. I mean, yeah, right? It just kind of makes sense. This one, because we're mapping, will get a key, which is really important. That's going to be the order.id, any unique value. And the class name of this is going to be BG accent, which is also provided by our UI library and automatically kind of applied. Beautiful. Let's open up the table row, and inside of a row is a cell, right? So let's open up a table cell. That's exactly what it's named from our UI library. I like it. And let's open this one up once again. There we go. Inside of the table cell lives, let's create a div with a class name of font-medium. This one will contain the order.shipping address. There we go, that we joined together, if you remember. !name, because as far as TypeScript is concerned, hey, this might not exist because it's marked optional in our database. And then right below this div, one more div with a class name. That's going to be hidden, a text of small, a text muted foreground, and on medium devices, this will be displayed as inline. So it's actually going to be visible. And inside of here, we're going to put the order.user.email, right? Just so we can reach out if anything is up, or update them on their order if you want to, if it has been shipped, and so on. Great, let's take a look at what the next cell will be. So we did the customer. What is the next one? That's going to be the status of the order. Great, so let's create one more table cell right here. And this table cell for the status is going to be the only one that's a bit different from the others. All others will be defined in this file right here. The status one, let's just write status for a second here. That's going to happen inside of a custom component that's actually going to interact with our database. So let's just mock this out and go back to this once we did the other ones. So let's check out what the third one is. That's going to be the purchase date. Well, nothing easier than that. Let's create a table cell. There we go, for this purchase date. And in here is going to live the order.created at, when this order was basically put into our database, automatically generated by Prisma, local date string. There we go. So it's going to display this date in the format of the user that's viewing it. So if you're in the US and I'm in Europe, it's going to display it differently for both of us, right? In your home country date format, basically. And this table cell will give a class name that's going to be hidden, and on medium devices, a table cell as well. Beautiful. Last one. What should that one be? It's going to be the amount. Well, also nothing easier than that. Let's create a new table cell. There we go. And the class name of this is going to be text right, just like the column we did for it. And inside of here, we're going to use our format price utility function to format the order.amount. There we go. And that's already it, right? That's the table done. Congratulations. It's very, very nice. We can simply save this. The only thing, as I said, that we're going to get back to is the status, because that will actually interact with our database. And now if we reload our page, we should see what happens. Let's give this a bit more space. There we are. Customer, Josh tried coding. There is the email, status, purchase date in my local kind of format, and the amount is $22. Very, very nice. That looks awesome. And if we go into like small screen, only the important stuff like the customer and the amount will be shown. Oh, and that doesn't look right. It shows the status and the $sign. So the status, of course, should not be shown in this view. We just forgot the class name. So let's add a class name to the table cell for the status. And this one is going to be hidden, and on small devices, a table cell. Oops, cell. There we go. I keep misspelling the cell word. Anyways, let's reload this page, and that should only show the amount on the right-hand side. Beautiful. Very, very nice. We're making great progress. And now to actually update the status of the order, right? From awaiting shipment to shipped and so on, that's going to happen right here inside of this table cell, where we just hard-coded status for now. We still need to change that. So let's create a new component in order to interact with our database and actually update the shipping status, right? And that's going to happen. Let's close out of all of these, and we can basically create it in the same folder as our dashboard. It's going to be specific to this page, so no point in making it reusable. Let's simply define a new file in our dashboard folder and call it the status dropdown.tsx. As always, const status dropdown is going to be equal to an arrow function that we export default at the bottom, status dropdown. There we go. And let's already return something from here to already put this in our page, right? So instead of just hard coding the status here, let's already go ahead and import our status dropdown component from ./status dropdown. Beautiful. This status dropdown will do two things. It's gonna first display the current status of the order, and second, it lets us change the status of the order. And in order to do that, we need two things as properties for this component. First off, that's gonna be the ID. That's gonna be a string. And we can't just do it like that. We need to define the ID as a string, just like so. So TypeScript is happy, right? And that's going to be important if we want to change the status from or for which order do we want to change the status? Well, that's going to be the ID. And then secondly, what is the current status? Let's call this the order status. We also need to know to display it. So the order status is going to be of type order status, basically the enum that we have defined in Prisma. So if we take a look at that, the order status, let's go to that enum. It's basically this as a TypeScript type, right? It's either fulfilled or shipped, or it's awaiting shipment, which it will be by default, and because it just makes sense. And I think I just voice cracked there. Anyways, let's save our status dropdown, and let's already give it these props from the parent. So in our case, the ID is simply going to be the order.id, and then the order status is simply going to be the order.status, so whatever order we are mapping over, right? And why is this giving us an error? Oh, because we probably forgot to return anything from here. That's fine, that is expected. Now, this is named the status dropdown, right? So what do we expect to return from here? Well, probably a dropdown. And in our UI library, that is called the dropdown menu that we import from our custom components, right? Inside of here is going to live the drop-down menu trigger. So basically the item, when we click it, that will open this drop-down menu. Let's open this up and pass it the asChild property because we want to define the button ourselves and don't want this to automatically be wrapped in another button, right? So whatever the child is will now be used as the trigger. For us, that's going to be a button element. And this button is going to get a variant, which is going to be outline. The class name for this button is going to be a width of 52, a flex, justify dash between, and items dash center. And this button is going to contain the current order status. But the thing is, if we just put the order status like so into our button, let's see what happens. Let's save all of this because this is going to be exactly what's in our database, how we internally identify the order status, right? So if we give this a bit more space, it's going to be like in lowercase awaiting underscore shipment. Like, wow, that just looks really bad. Let's make this user friendly. Let's make this user readable, right? And that's going to happen above our component. This is just going to be a constant, a const label underscore map. So we're going to put it in all uppercase as the convention that I told you about, right? And this will be of type record. So basically a map. And the first type is going to be the key of type of order status. So basically what we're saying here is as the object keys, we're going to put in here only these three are valid object keys. So we're going to see what that means here in a second. And each one of those is going to map to a string, which is going to be the same thing in human readable format. So let's create this object. And because we told TypeScript that the entries here will be of key of type of order status, check this out. When we now press Ctrl spacebar to get the auto completion, we can see exactly only the options that we can pass in here. It's completely type safe. How awesome is that? And then let's define the user readable format for the awaiting shipment. That's going to be awaiting shipment, and let's capitalize that. So that's going to be what the user actually sees instead of this, because this just looks bad, right? That's not what we want to display to the user. The fulfilled that we can pass in here is going to be fulfilled and not fulfilled. And then lastly, the shipped is just going to say shipped. And that's already it. That's our label map. So these are just the human readable labels that we can now use in our button. And to do this, we can simply say the label underscore map at the index of the order status, right? So this is always going to be coming from our database. And because TypeScript knows these are only the valid types for the label map, this will always map to a correct entry, and TypeScript is going to be very happy with us. And right below the label map, let's put the little icon to indicate that this is a drop down. And this is going to be the chevrons up down icon from Lucid React. This can be self-closing. And the class name is going to be margin left 2, a height of 4, a width of 4, a shrink of 0, and lastly, an opacity of 50. There we go. Let's save that. Let's see what happens. And we're going to see the beautiful human readable format show up for our status right here. That looks awesome. Great. The only thing that doesn't work right now is that this doesn't actually open the drop-down menu. And well, that's because we haven't defined the drop-down menu content yet. So let's do it. Let's define the drop-down menu content right below our trigger from our custom UI library. And the class name we're going to give to this content is going to be a padding of 0. Inside of the drop-down menu content, let's map over all of the possible variants that there are, right? The awaiting shipment, the fulfilled, and the shipped. So basically what we can update the order status to. So we're going to say object.keys and pass in the order status. There we go. And we're going to say .map. And for each available status, we can now simply render out some JSX right away. So this is going to be the actual string of awaiting shipment or fulfilled and so on. And for each one, we're going to render out the drop-down menu item. Simply import that from our drop-down menu as well. And because we're mapping, remember to give this a key, right? Otherwise, we're going to get a little React complaint. And also, let's give this drop-down menu item a class name, and that's going to be a dynamic class name. So let's use our CN helper function instead of making it a string. The default class name that we're going to apply to the drop-down menu item is going to be flex, a text of small, a gap of 1, items center, padding of 2.5, a cursor of default, so it's not going to go into this like pointer, right? We don't want that. And on hover, this is going to get a background zinc of 100. There we go. And now also let's differentiate the active drop-down menu item from the non-active one. So the current status should be highlighted differently than the non-current status. And that's going to happen dynamically in our CN helper function. Let's create an object right here. And let's apply a bgsync of 100 permanently as the background, not only on hover, but all the time if the order status that we get as a prop is triple equal to the status of this current element that we're mapping over. So if it's like shipped, for example, then the shipped is going to get a background sync of 100. And now inside of this drop-down menu item, let's open it up so we can already see what we're doing here. Two things are going to live. First off, a check mark. Let's apply a check right here. This is an icon that comes from Lucid React. And this will get a class name that's also going to be dynamic. So let's get rid of the default string and let's pass this or CN helper function. The default class name we're going to apply to this check is going to be a margin right of 2, a height 4, width 4, and text primary. So in our case, that's going to be like a green tone. And as for the dynamic part, we are going to apply if the order status we get as a prop is triple equal to the status. So if this is the currently selected element that we're mapping over, in that case, we're going to say opacity 100. And in the other case, we're going to say opacity 0 if this is not the active element, right? So we're kind of keeping space for the check. You're going to see that in a second here once we actually hit save. And then right below here, we're simply going to render out the label underscore map at the index of status. And because TypeScript can't properly infer the status type, it just thinks it's a random string, but we know that it's going to be the correct types, one of these three, right? We can simply cast this type as order status. There we go, and tell TypeScript, hey, this is totally fine. We know what's happening. Great. And if we save that, let's take a look at what we just did. Right, let's read out the page. Sometimes this takes a bit for me. Hopefully your PC is faster. And then once we open this drop-down menu, we can see we reserve the space for each kind of check mark, right? It's there, but it's not visible. And only if the item is selected, then will it actually become visible. So in our case, the awaiting shipment is like a little gray background, and also the check mark, right? It just looks really, really good. Beautiful. Now the only thing that's missing is when we click an item here, it doesn't actually change the status, right? And that's not ideal. Of course, we want to actually interact with our database and change the order status. And in order to do that, it's surprisingly simple. Let's go into our status dropdown at the very top here, and that is why we receive the ID as a prop. So this will become very easy for us. Let's destructure something from the use mutation hook that we're going to use for this, just as always, right? This simply takes an object and we can pass it the mutation key. This can be, for example, let's say change-order-status, because that's exactly what's going to happen here. And as for the mutation function, well, we want to pass it our server action, right? What should happen on mutation? So let's define a actions file, actions.ts, inside of our dashboard folder, where we're just going to define what should happen in this case. And it's going to be really simple. So inside of our actions file, let's export a const and let's close out of that top bar. I think it takes up a lot of space in our editor. So anyways, inside of this actions file, let's create a new const and let's call it change order status. And this is going to be an asynchronous arrow function. There we go. And we need to receive two things in here. First off is the ID. Which order do we want to modify the status of? And secondly, the new status. What should the new status be set to? Right? And to make TypeScript happy, let's define the types right here. The ID is going to be a string, and the new status is going to be of type order status. So any of the three states that we allow in our Prisma enum, right? Any of these three right here is valid as an argument into our function. Great. And now the actual logic is of course going to be really straightforward. We just need to make one database call. So let's await the db.order.update. And now this always takes a where property. Which order do we want to update? Well, basically where the ID matches the ID that is input into this function, right? And lastly, let's define the new data that we want to modify. That's going to be the status, and we're going to set it to the new status. As easy as that, right? 4 lines of code, that's it. We can already save this action, beautiful, and now use this change order status in our status dropdown as the mutation function, right? It's that easy, and that just works. And now the last thing we want to do is on success, when this ran successfully, when the status was updated, we want to refresh the browser for the user, so the result is actually shown, right? And we can do that inside of the onSuccess callback of this mutation. And now to refresh the user browser, we can simply grab the router from useRouter, which comes from /navigation, not /router, as I told you about earlier. And we can now simply call the router.refresh. That's a function we have on the router that's going to refresh the user browser to get all the most recent data, right? And let's destructure the mutate from our use mutation that we actually used to call this function. And now the only thing left to do is to actually call this function whenever we change the dropdown option, right? So that's going to happen on the dropdown menu item when we select any item, and we can check for that event with the on click, right? In that case, we're going to call our mutate function. And this expects some arguments we need to pass in here. For 1, that's our ID. And for 2, that's the new status we need to pass in here. And that's going to be the status. And once again, because TypeScript can't properly infer this, it thinks it's just a random string. When we know it's one of the 3 correct options, we can simply cast the type here as order status, because that's what we know it will actually be. Perfect. Let's save our status dropdown. And you're going to notice one thing, an error. That's because this only works in a client-side component. And of course, we still need to mark this as use client for Next.js to know that we want to use client-side hooks in this component. Beautiful. So let's reload the page and let's see what happens. There we go. And now everything should be fully functional. Let's check this out. We have our last week or last month, all the progress bars work, the incoming orders we can see right here, the customer status, purchase date, and amount. Beautiful. And now if we actually change this order, because for example, we are done printing the case and we just shipped it, bam, let's click shipped and let's see what happens. That should reload our browser, which either takes really long or doesn't work. Why is this? That should work. Why is it not working? Let's reload the page once more. Let's click shipped. And did I mess anything up? Let me check. Okay, after 5 minutes of very confused debugging, because this should definitely work. There's no way this doesn't work. I just noticed the problem. We didn't say use server at the very top of the actions, and Next.js just doesn't tell you about it. They just kind of leave you in the dark to see what happens by yourself. And let's try this again. Let's hit shipped. There we go. Okay, finally, that was the problem. Dude, I was so confused because this should definitely work. And now it does. Beautiful. So we can now actually change the status whenever we process the order to shipped, awaiting shipment, shipped, and so on. Very, very nice. So we can keep track of all the incoming orders, stay on top of what the hell is happening, and forward them to our supplier, update the user actually when we ship the order, and so on. Beautiful work, man. That's a fully functional admin dashboard we have just built together with the revenue and the table and all the incoming orders. That is awesome, man. Very, very good job. All right, dude, and we are literally almost done. Great work, and there's only a couple of small details left that I want to implement together with you right now. So first of those is gonna be customer email. When somebody buys from us, we want to send them a small email thanking them for the purchase, right? That's what we're gonna implement first. Second is gonna be a button loading state that we missed earlier, button loading state. And that is when we configured our phone, when we dragged around the image, right, in step 2, there is no loading state on the button yet. We forgot to do that, I noticed. And then I think we should be almost, and the metadata. So we don't want this to say create next app and then the Vercel icon, right? That's really bad. That just looks super generic. We want a beautiful custom thumbnail when you send the link to this website, as well as a favicon and the title, right? So we're going to say metadata. And these are a bunch of small things, but together they make up a much better website than it is currently. it makes a really, really big difference if you implement that small things. And the first one is gonna be a email that the user is gonna get when they received when we received the order, right? And in order to send this email, we are gonna install a really neat tool that is called React Email. It's basically a super modern way to write emails. Previously, it was always a lot of pain to write emails if you've ever done it yourself. And React Email makes it a lot easier because we can essentially just write emails as regular React components, right? It's super intuitive. And this is gonna happen. Let's create a separate folder for this in our components. And let's simply name this emails. Right, so this is gonna live next to the UI folder, and let's create the email that a user will receive once we have gotten their payment and they ordered the phone, right? Let's name this the order received email.tsx, because again, this is nothing else than a regular React component. Now, to actually use React Email, let's install the package for it. Let's go into our command line and say npm install yarn add npm install, doesn't matter, at react-email/components. And these basically are some pre-made React components that we can simply use to kind of design and construct our email as we wanted to in basic React syntax. It's really cool, and you're going to see exactly how it works right now once that is done installing. Beautiful. And this is nothing else than a regular React component. So let's create it. Let's name it order received email. And this is going to be equal to a basic arrow function that we export default at the bottom. Order received email. Perfect. And this order received email will receive a single prop, and that's going to be the shipping address of the user that they ordered with. And we can simply define that type inline. That's a very simple type. The shipping address will be of type shipping address, basically the type we get back from Prisma. There we go. Let's import that, and we're all ready to get started in actually writing this email together. At the top level, we're going to use the HTML element, but let's reload our window in order for the auto imports to hopefully work. And do they? Nope, they still don't. Okay, so let's manually import this. Let's import the HTML component from at React email/components. There we go. And then we can simply use that, no props, no nothing, just a regular element. Inside of this HTML, we're gonna put a self-closing head tag. And this actually works now. We also import that. Everything we're gonna use in here, basically, we're gonna import from at React email/components, right? No exceptions here. Inside of here, let's create the preview. And this is the text that will be shown when the user is in their email inbox, the main text that will be used here. And we're going to say in here, your order summary and estimated delivery date. And that's going to get rid of the error. Beautiful. And of course, by the way, we still need to return all of this. There we go. Okay, we can give this a bit more space. And now below the preview, we're going to create the body. This is going to contain the main content of the email. And this body is going to get a certain style. Now, this video, very important, is not a CSS tutorial. We don't want to get into CSS, right? That's a whole different topic in and of itself. So what I did is I prepared all the email CSS in the copy and paste list for you to simply grab and then paste right below or export default or above it. It doesn't really matter. Just put it somewhere in this file so we can use it. And we don't need to worry about any CSS headaches anymore because, again, this is not a CSS tutorial, right? We can just save time by not doing that. And this body will get a style of main. Now, inside of the body, we're going to open this up. Let's put a container. And that's basically going to be a wrapper for all the content we're going to put in here. And please let me, oh man, just go away. There we go. Sometimes VS Code is just a bit frustrating. And this is going to get a style of container. All right, as you can probably guess from the name. Now, inside of this container, we're going to create a section element. This is not going to be self-closing. Let's open this up. And this section will get a style, which is going to be the message style. Perfect. Now, inside of here, let's use an IMG, an image we also get from React Email. This is going to be self-closing, and this will take first of all the source. And the source is going to be dynamic, and basically now we need to do a check. Where do we get the image source from? And that's going to be different between local development and actual deployment. So let's do that check at the very top here. We're going to say const base URL, which is going to be the baseline URL for the image source right here. And that's going to be the check of is going to be equal to the process.env.node_env, which will automatically give us the environment in which this is currently running, right? Wherever we execute this code. And if that is equal to development, we get full type safety here because this is a built-in environment variable in the Node.js runtime. And if this is equal to development, in that case, our base URL will be http localhost 3000. 3000, not 300. There we go. And in the other case, right, where we are in a production setting, in that case, let's grab the URL that Vercel gave us, right? So we deployed this to casecopra.vercel.app. So that's going to be our live deployment URL that we can use as the base for this image. And also, let's remove the trading slash so we can properly construct the URL wherever we use the actual image. So let me show you how this works. Now for the image source, we can simply dynamically insert the base URL determined by the environment that we're currently running in, and then append the /snake-3.png, which is basically the snake in a box that's going to be in the image, right? Let's give this a width, and that's going to be 65. And let's also give this a height, and this will be 73, and that's in pixels, by the way. The alt tag is gonna be delivery snake, and the style, this is gonna get, let's just inline this, is gonna be a margin of auto, so this will be centered in the email. And now, of course, we also need to import the section. That won't happen automatically. There we go. And just like that, we can get rid of the error and display the snake 3, if you're wondering which one that is. It's this one right here in our email. Beautiful, very, very nice. Now, below this image, let's continue. Still inside of the section, this is where we're gonna create a heading that we also get from React email as a component. And the style for this is going to be the global.heading. Let's open this heading up, and inside of here say, thank you for your order, exclamation point. And below this heading, let's create a text. We also get that from React email, and the style for this text is going to be the global.text. And let's open this text up. In here, we're going to say we were preparing, there we go, everything for delivery, and will notify you once your package has been shipped, period. Delivery usually takes 2 days. And of course, this is something I made up, right? Is that true? Mostly, yes. Most package carriers, I would say, take about 2 days. I guess it depends on where you live, etc. But this is just something we can put in there. That's totally fine. And let's actually grab this whole text element, copy and paste it down using Shift, Alt, Arrow down. There we go. Then slightly modify the style. Let's turn this into an object this time and cut out what was there before. So we're gonna put this in an object, then spread in everything we had before, right? So the global.text. So we're applying all the styles we had before, but also one more. That's why we do all of this, which is gonna be the margin top, and that's gonna be 24 to kind of visually space these two text elements out. So in the second one, we're gonna say, if you have any questions regarding your order, please feel free to contact us with your order number, and we're here to help, period. Okay, so if they want to reach out, they should hopefully include their order number, which makes it easier for us to look up their order in the database and update them on anything that might happen with the order. Beautiful. After the closing section, let's create an HR element, also from React email. And this is just a horizontal kind of divider, which just looks really nice in the email. And the style for this is going to be the global.hr that we prepared. Beautiful. Let's create one more section down here. This section will get a style, and that's gonna be the global.default padding style. Let's open this section up, and inside of here, we're gonna create a text element. with a style, and that's gonna be the address title, just like that. Great. Now inside of this text element, let's scroll down a bit. There we go. Let's say shipping to, and let's dynamically now include the shipping address that we pass in here as a prop.name. There we go. Beautiful. So that's going to be the name of the customer that bought this product. And to actually display the address and not just the name, let's copy this text element down once and change the style. The style is going to be the ... global.text. So we are spreading in all the properties of the global.text, which is this one right here. We're just spreading those in right here. And let's add one more, and that's going to be a font size of 14. Right? And then inside of this text, we're going to say very many dynamic stuff in here. The first one is going to be the shipping address.street. Then comma separate that with the shipping address.city. Then comma separate that with the shipping address.state. Then without comma separation, right after that dynamically, again, the fourth dynamic element here, the shipping address.postal code. There we go. And that is already it. That's going to be the address of the user where we will ship this phone case. Awesome. Now below the closing text, below the closing section, let's copy and paste our HR element. Where did we have it? Right here. We can simply grab and copy that. So above the container, above the container, there we go, at the end of the section. This is how we're going to separate things. And now let's open up one more section right down here. This section is going to get a style that is going to be the global.default padding. Let's open this section up, and inside of here is going to live a row, which is also something we can import from React email components. This row is going to get a style, and that's going to be a display of inline flex, just like that, and a margin bottom of 40, which is also in pixels, by the way, if you're wondering what the unit is here automatically. Inside of this row, let's create a column, which is something we can import from React email components. And this column will get a style, and that's going to be a width of 170. Let's open up this column. And by the way, we're almost done. Don't worry. This is not going to take up too much of our time. And inside of this column, we're going to list the actual order number. So this is going to contain a text element. This text element will get a style, and that's going to be the global.paragraph with bold that we can use for this text. And inside of here, we're going to say order number. Simply copy and paste this text element down using Shift Alt arrow down. And in here, we want to include the actual order ID. And I forgot to tell you, that's what we also need to receive as a prop, by the way, but we can already give it the style. That's going to be our track.number. And while we are at the top of the props, let's also receive the order ID that will be of type string, order ID of type string that we can simply list there. And one more thing we want to do is to also receive the order date. And that is also the order date going to be a string that we're going to pass from our database based on the created add property that we get from our database, right? And that's it. That's all the props. I promise we can simply now insert them here. So as for the track.number class that we have in the second text element, this is where the order ID is going to go. That's the order number for the user. And now we can simply grab this column, paste it down using Shift Alt arrow down once. The second column doesn't even need the same class name as the first one, and we're simply going to change the order ID with the order date that we receive as a prop in this component. Perfect. Now the footer, we're almost done with this component. Let's one more time grab the HR and simply paste it below our section just as a kind of visual separator. And by the way, you're of course going to see how this email looks like. And we're going to deploy this together in the end and then take a look if everything is really working correctly to ensure that I'm leaving you with a fully working project. So of course, you're going to see the email in action. So let's create one last section here, absolutely last one, and this will get a style, which is going to be the padding Y. There we go. Let's open this section up. Inside of here lives a row, no class name, no style, no nothing, and inside of here lives a text element. This one is going to get a style, and that's going to be an object where we spread in the footer.text class, add a padding top of 30 and a padding bottom of 30 as well. And inside of here, we're going to say please contact us if you have any questions. And then in parentheses, if you reply to this email, we won't be able to see it. Because in most cases, you're going to send this from a no reply email automatically, and you're not going to see if they literally reply to a no reply email, right? You want them to email you directly. In that case, of course, not in every case, right? If you send the email from your personal email, then they could reply, but in most cases, in company context and enterprise context, you're going to have a no reply email for sending out customer emails. Great. And now below the closing text and below the closing row, let's add one last row of this component, very simple one, not even with style or anything. And inside of here, one last text element. The text element here is going to get a style, and that's going to be the footer.text. And inside of this text, we're going to say, with a little copyright symbol that you can simply grab from Google, probably copyright symbol, or maybe if you have a Mac, you could also just do it on your keyboard. Let's just copy the copyright symbol, or I think you could also use and copy like that. I think that should also work, but I'm just going to put it here, and we're going to say case Cobra. And by the way, if you can't find it, doesn't matter, right? It's not very important. Case Cobra Inc. Incorporated, all rights reserved. And of course, I made this up, right? There is no Case Cobra Inc. I just made that up, but I think it makes the email look a lot more serious than it really is, which is kind of cool. Awesome. And that is our order received email. Now, when do we want to send this email, and how do we send this email? Very simple. When do we want to send it in our webhook? So when the user actually paid and we are sure that they did by Stripe, then we want to send them this email. And to send it to them, we're going to go to resend.com. And there are 10 million ways to send an email, right? I think resend is the easiest one. And we're going to create an API key at resend.com. So this is basically, if we're not logged in, let's go into an incognito window, resend.com. It's basically very easy to send emails to them. It's email for developers, basically. Using AWS under the hood. You could just use AWS yourself if you wanted to, but it's a very easy way to send emails to your users. So we're going to use it in this video. Not sponsored, of course. I just think it makes a lot of sense for this video. So the API key name, let's name it Case Cobra. The permission is going to be full access, and the domain, all domains, that is totally fine. Let's copy our key and then paste it into our .env file. At the very bottom, let's say resend_API_key is going to be equal to that key that we just grabbed from the resend dashboard. And by the way, if you don't have an account with them, of course, you can log in with GitHub, and that's going to give you your own API key for resend. Beautiful. And resend makes it really easy to interact with their APIs, with their own SDK. So let's install it. Let's say npm install resend, and that's already it. The package is very lightweight, it's very small. That's going to be done installing really fast. Great. And then at the top of our Stripe webhook, so by the way, if you're wondering where that is, the webhook that we're just in, it's under source app API webhooks route.ts. That is exactly where we are right now. And we're going to create a new resend right here. We're going to say const resend is equal to a new resend and pass in the process.env.resend API key. By the way, if you're wondering where resend comes from, where that class is imported from, we can simply import resend from resend, the package we have just installed there, SDK, right? And now this makes it incredibly easy to send our own email to our user. Let me show you how it works. Let's go down all the way below creating or updating our order in Prisma, right? The DB order update. Below that is where we're going to say await resend.emails.send. And this takes a bunch of options, like for example, the from. This is going to be the sender of our email. And in our case, let's say case Cobra. And then in these angled kind of brackets like HTML, and we're going to say hello@joshtriedcoding.com. And now please don't use my email here. You won't be able to. It will just throw an error. Use the email that you used to connect to resend, that you logged in with, right? Either your GitHub email if you logged in through GitHub, or your email that the login token was sent to, right? It's very important that you do that. Because by default on the free plan, either you have to verify your own email to send from a custom email, that's what I did, or you can only send from the email that you logged in with for security reasons, of course. So use the email that you logged in with to resend right here, and that's gonna work. Okay, and now the email to, where do we want to send this email to? That's gonna be the event.data.object.customer_details.email. There we go. Very, very long kind of thing, right? Kind of text, but that's gonna be the actual email of the customer. Then the subject we can pass in here. That's gonna be thanks for your order! Exclamation point. Awesome. And lastly, let's pass in the React property, the actual content of the email that we want to send. And that's nothing else than order received email that we just created in that other component. Remember, we can simply now invoke this with the props that it expects, right? So that's gonna be, for example, the order ID. So if we take a look at where this comes from, let's see, where is the order ID? Here it is. We're destructuring it from the session metadata. Then the second thing this expects, let's see, is gonna be the order date, which is gonna be a string, right? And in order to get this order date, we can simply say this is gonna be a new date to locale, where is it? To locale date string. And that's gonna automatically convert the state to a string. What we could also do, right, is we could also receive the const updated order from or await db order update call, and then simply use the created add property of that updated order, right? So in that case, I think that is a bit better than this. This totally works. I just wanted to show it to you. But if we actually use the created add property and convert that to a locale date string, in that case, it's always going to match our database. And I just think it's a bit of a nicer approach, right? And lastly, as for the shipping address, we can simply use the same thing that we passed into our database call, this one right here. So all the stuff that's in the create right here, we can simply grab that and paste it into our shipping address that we're sending to our component. That is going to give us a TypeScript error. I know this also happened in my demo project, but we can simply go ahead and ignore this error because everything is all right with this, and TypeScript should just stop complaining. Because that's exactly what we put into our database as well. We know this works and we can safely ignore this error. We just don't care about the error, man. Just send the email, please, and that's gonna work beautifully. Great, very, very nice. And that's all we need to send the email once the purchase is verified by Stripe. Perfect, let's cross this off our list. Let's just strike that through. And just let me change this to red. There we go. Okay, now next up is a button loading state that we missed, and that actually happens in step 2 of when we create a case, right? So while this loads in local development, where I want to show you where this happens, let's already navigate to the culprit, which is the design configurator component where we currently don't have the loading state. And dude, this takes ridiculously long. 20 seconds on my PC. Wow. All right. Anyways, let's just upload an image, and I want to show you where exactly this happens. And that is right down here in the button that we use to proceed from the design configurator. Where is that? Let's Control F button. There we go. And this button right here, the continue button, it doesn't have a loading state, right? But we've already implemented all the logic we need in order to properly handle this loading state. And dude, I wish I could show you, but it just takes ridiculously long to do. Yeah, screw it. Let's just implement the button loading state. As you can see, it's not here, right? So that's gonna be, well, how do we do the loading state, right? If we check out the button, what do we need to pass in here? Wait, that's the status dropdown. It takes me, why does it take me to the status dropdown? Dude, my PC is doing some weird stuff. What the hell? Let's go to the button component. Finally, that's the page. I'm very frustrated with my PC, as you might be able to tell. Anyways, but I'm not, yeah, 14,000 milliseconds. Anyways, dude, I'm not gonna let that affect this video. So inside of the button, what do we need to pass in order to make the loading state happen? Well, basically two things, right? The isLoading and the loading text. So let's do that. Where do we get this loading state from? Very easy. We get it in our design configurator from React Query. So where are we doing this? Where do we have the use query? Let's just use mutation. Screw it. Let's just control F it. There we are. In line 47 right here, that's where we can simply grab something called the isPending And this isPending is essentially the loading state. It just means that we are currently executing whatever is in our mutation function. In our case, the save configuration and also the underscore save config, right? So we can simply use that as the loading state for our button right down here in our JSX. So the isLoading is going to be equal to isPending, and also the disabled is going to be equal to isPending as well, because we want to disable the button while it is loading. And lastly, the loading text we can pass in here is just going to be saving. Right? And because this is already loaded, it was this button right here that I wanted to show you where the loading state doesn't happen, but I guess we already fixed it, so it's fine. Anyways, great. We fixed the button loading state. When we now hit the button, there we are, saving ... We see a beautiful loading state here now. Perfect. That's already the second item. We can strike that through. And we're almost done with this entire project, man. One last thing missing. That is the metadata. We don't want this to say create next app or anything. That just looks really bad. Instead, what we want to do is to, oh wow, and it finally compiled the page. Wow, dude. And by the way, one thing we can do is give this your iPhone case a bit more space to the top. I'm not too happy with how that looks. So let's just go ahead and fix that. Let's navigate into our design preview. So as you can tell, we're almost done. We're just fixing a bunch of small things that we just noticed on the way. So on this div right below our login modal, this is what we're going to change first. The margin top 20 is going to remain, but we're going to give it a flex dash call, and an items dash center. And of course that is going to conflict with our grid. So we're only going to apply the grid from medium and onwards. And we're also going to remove the grid calls 1. That just doesn't make a lot of sense here. And that's that class done. For the div above the phone, we're going to remove the call span 4 on small devices. So all we're left are these three right here. The phone itself, we're going to join the class name together with a maximum width of 150 px. And then on medium devices, we're going to remove that limitation again. So on medium devices and upwards, we're going to apply a maximum width of full once again, so it can fill up all the space that it needs to. Then we're going to remove the small margin top 0 right here from the your model label case, basically the space between the iPhone model and the actual title right here that we talked about before. That just doesn't look good, and we don't want it in our app. And let's save that and already preview of the changes that we made. So let's reload the page. That's gonna take a bit once again on my PC. And then is that now the most up-to-date version? Let's see. Let's preview this. There we go. If we're on full screen, then the phone is going to expand. There we go. That looks great. Now if we zoom in, there we go, there we go, there we go. The phone is not way too huge anymore like it was before. And that looks so much nicer. All right, perfect. I'm really happy with this. You could, yeah, maybe the phone should take up like a bit more space here. Maybe it should take up, what does it take up right now? Let's see. So on exactly this size right here, this maybe looks a bit weird. Right now the phone is very small, so we might want to say, where is this? This is medium devices and up. We're gonna say call span 4. In this case, so it's gonna take up more space right here. Yes, that looks much better. And then on large devices, we can say call span 3 once again, and that will just look a lot nicer. All right, awesome. Dude, I'm very happy we got this fixed. This looks a lot better than it did before. Just kind of on the fly together with you here. Beautiful. And oh, that, yeah, wasn't even an item. We just wanted to fix that to make it look better. That's totally cool. And now the last thing, that's going to be our metadata. And that's really simple, by the way. To make this look good with the actual title and image and so on, the favicon rather, we're going to create that in our source folder under lib, under utils. This is where we're going to create a utility function to handle the metadata. Let's call this function export function. There we go. Construct metadata. And we can close out of the sidebar. Great. This will take a couple of parameters. First off, the title, and let's default this to case Cobra. Oh, and if we want to default this, we have to use an equal sign and not the object syntax. So we're saying the default value of this property will be case Cobra custom high dash quality phone cases. Now, the description this takes is going to be also with an equal sign, equal to create custom high quality phone cases in seconds. Beautiful. Now, the image, the preview image, when you send a link to this application, is going to be /thumbnail.png, something we have in our public folder. If we take a look, it will be right here, the thumbnail. Hell yeah, that looks absolutely great. That's gonna be basically the image when we send a link to our application. Beautiful. And then lastly, we're gonna put the icons and default that to /favicon.ico. So basically .icon. And now to tell TypeScript, TypeScript is very confused right now. What is going on here? To tell TypeScript the types of these, let's inline type these. The title optional is gonna be a string. The description, also optional, is going to be a string. The image, optional, is going to be a string. And lastly, the icons, also optional, is of course also going to be a string. Beautiful. Let's say this is equal to an empty object, just like so. And this function will return metadata. And that's a type we get from Next. To tell Next.js, hey, this will actually return the metadata that you expect. And then let's open up this function right here. And now the only thing that TypeScript is complaining about is that we're not actually returning the metadata. So let's do it. In here, let's return an object containing the title that we defaulted to, this one right up here, the description, then afterwards the open graph. So this is something the metadata also takes. And right now my PC is super slow again, so screw it. I can't show you anyways. This is going to contain the title, the description as well, and also the images. And the images are nothing else than an array of objects containing a URL property. And we can just say it's going to be the image that is passed into the construct metadata, or the thumbnail.png that we have set to be shared as the open graph image when you share a link to this application. Perfect. We can also define a Twitter card that's going to be shown when you share a link to this app on Twitter. Basically, this takes a card and we can set this to summary large image as a string. This also takes the title, the description, and the images property, which is an array of strings. In our case, we also want to use the image, right? So, or thumbnail to be used when somebody shares a link to this app on Twitter. And lastly, we can pass the creator if you want. So in my case, that's going to be @JoshTriedCoding. That's how I like my name on Twitter. You can put your name, or if you don't have Twitter, just don't worry about it, right? You don't need to pass it. Beautiful. And lastly, let's pass in the icons. Also passed into this function, and we're receiving it as a parameter up here. And that's it, right? That's how we construct metadata. And now let's go into our main layout to simply use this, because right now we have all the default Next.js stuff here. So the Vercel image and the create next app as the name, that's not really what we want, right? Let's simply export const metadata is going to be equal to or construct metadata utility function that we just created. And because we defaulted all the values, we can simply call it and don't worry about the rest, because all the default values are great. And if you ever want to change them for any subpage that you have, you can always do that by simply passing in an object here and overwriting the defaults that we have just defined. Perfect. And if we now go ahead and reload our page a couple of times, hard reload, we should be able to eventually see the favicon pop up. Oh, by the way, we probably won't, because the favicon is still the Vercel icon. So go ahead into the GitHub repository for this project, and you're going to find the actual favicon under source app, and then favicon.ico in the GitHub repository. So I've got the actual project open here on my right-hand side. So just pretend this is the GitHub repo, okay? You're going to go into source app, and then here you're going to find the favicon that you can simply download to your device, and you can just drag it in here and overwrite the favicon that is already present in the app folder, right? Just replace it with this Cobra image, and that's gonna be the favicon for our app. And if we now hard reload our development server a couple of times, it normally doesn't do it on the first try, just 2, 3, 4 times sometimes it takes, and then it's actually eventually going to replace our favicon, and it seems to still have cached the other version. It's not really that important. If we deploy this, then we will actually be able to see this favicon. Awesome, dude. Let's try this. We are done. Let's deploy this to production and see if everything works correctly. And in order to do this, let's head over to Vercel really quick. And yeah, let's head over to Vercel. We're gonna check out our deployment together. Let's go into our project and let's update the environment variables. For example, with the recent key, right? Let's go into our environment variables. There we go. Let's scroll down and let's add the recent key that we have in our project that we just added. So let's copy it from our .env file, paste it in here and hit save. And one more thing we want to update, and that is gonna be the upload thing underscore URL. This is to make upload thing work properly with our deployed version. And this is simply going to be the Vercel domain. So our production domain that we have. Let's just visit our website, copy the URL and simply paste it in as the upload thing URL. Really no magic here, but just so upload thing knows our app and can communicate it or communicate with it properly, right? Perfect. With those environment variables in place, that's great. Let's build our project one last time. What do we get here? JWT expired. Well, that's fair enough because the login expired. That's no problem. And let's build our app one last time to see if we get any errors. So let's say yarn build or npm run build and see if everything builds correctly. And if it does, then chances are it will also do that on Vercel. And then we're going to give this a final run to check if everything works correctly. All right, so let's give this a second and see what happens. Okay, so it compiled successfully. Now it's linting. Image elements must have an alt prop. Yeah, okay, so sometimes we forgot to pass like an alt tag into an image or something, but that's not a biggie. Metadata base property is not set for resolving social, open graph or Twitter images using local. Oh, okay, that's actually a really useful hint right here. And basically all it means is that in our construct metadata, we forgot to pass one thing that is going to be the metadata base we need to pass in here. Very simple, not a lot of work. This is just a new URL we can create and simply pass in our production URL right here. It's important that this is production. We don't want to use localhost for this, of course. And then let's try the build again this time. Or actually, we don't really need to try it again. We know this will just work now. The error is going to be gone because I've did this like previously. But just to show you that this is actually gonna fix the error, let's just do it and then deploy to Vercel together and give this whole app a final run. So that's gonna lint, check the validity of types, collect page data. Great, now the error is gone. We have a valid metadata base that the Open Graph image can now pull from, and there it goes, rendered our entire app correctly. That is beautiful. All right, let's say git add dot. Let's say git commit -m and let's just say update stuff. It doesn't really matter what you put in here. This is just a personal project for us. And then let's say git push. If you were like working in a software team, this would be a horrible commit message. But this is just a personal project, as I just said, so it's totally fine to do that. I don't care about commit messages at all when I'm just working on stuff that nobody else will really see. But if it's like a public repo or something, then it is more important. Anyways, okay, that's gonna create or build. Why do we have this open twice? We don't even need that. That's gonna deploy our project to Vercel. We can see the build process right here. That is great. And then let's let this load and give it a final check. All right, dude, there we are. It deployed successfully. So let's check this out. Let's go to casecobra.vercel.app. Let's reload this a couple times and hopefully we should see the favicon pop up. And I think my browser just caches these. Normally, of course, the favicon should be there. There is literally no alternative because if we take a look at the public folder, there is literally no Vercel icon anywhere in here. Right? Is that true? Vercel, if we search for Vercel, yeah, no, we deleted all that stuff. It can't know about the Vercel stuff anymore. So this is probably just a caching thing in my browser. I would have loved to show you that this works, but maybe I need to switch browser or something for this to work. Anyways, chances are you're probably gonna see the favicon here. And of course, like for all the apps that are deployed to the web, like profanity.dev and so on, they all have a custom favicon just like this. So this works, but I think it's just cached in my browser, which is kind of unfortunate, but whatever. Anyways, there is our landing page. Beautiful, what our customers say, what people are buying. Upload your own photo and get your own case now. Awesome, very, very nice. Let's click. Actually, let's try logging in. Yeah, let's try logging. Oh, and good that we did. Invalid callback URL, and that's because we still need to configure this URL to be used in or well, with kind, right? So let's log in with kind. I'm going to do that with GitHub really quick. And then we should be able to just set this URL right here in as a valid callback URL. So let's log into kind. Let's switch our business to Case Cobra Dev, which is our Case Cobra project. And then let's head over to settings. And is it here? No, is it? Ah, here it is. Applications under environment. Let's open up our Next.js app. And then we should be able to set the callback URLs. Application homepage URI. Let's just put casecobra.vercel.app there. Application login URI. That's fine. Let's put the allowed callback URL. And let's include that here. And maybe we don't even need this. Yeah, let's just remove it. I don't think we need it. Let's just put the callback URL right here. And also include casecobra.vercel.app as the allowed logout redirect URL. And that should already do the trick. Let's save this. Let's go back into our app and let's try logging in again. And now that should work with that callback URL configured. Beautiful. And since we're already logged in, that's automatically going to log us into our app. Awesome. Okay, beautiful. Let's click create case. Let's upload any image. I'm going to choose this one right here, the little snake. That's going to upload. And then if everything works correctly, we should be redirected here in a second. Let's go into our console to see what happens. Failed to load 4.4. That's fine. That's not a big problem. It just didn't find the API auth logout, but it doesn't need to. If we click this button, that's going to log us out. Okay, so let's try configuring this. Let's drag the snake around. Let's make the phone case. I like black the most, so I'm going to stay with black. Let's go iPhone 13, this one right here. And let's click all the premium options, because why not? It's our app. We can do whatever we want without having to ask. And then let's hit continue. We can see a beautiful loading state on the button. Beautiful. Very, very nice. And now we should be forwarded to your iPhone 13 case with your actual image as we configured it, popping up right here on the left-hand side. Beautiful. Okay, now let's hit checkout. That's going to summarize all the order details. And that's going to forward us to Stripe with the actual product price. Beautiful. I'm going to use my hello@joshtriedcoding.com email. Let's just use Josh as the shipping address and then the random kind of stuff that I always used before. As for the credit card information, let's use a bunch of 4.2s right here. The Stripe test card that we always use, any random date and any CVC. And then let's hit pay. And let's see what happens. Two things should happen. First off, we should be redirected to the thank you page where it actually polls for the payment status. And then secondly, we should get an email, right? So let's wait for this, loading your order. This won't take long. Your case is on the way. Beautiful. There is our live phone case preview with a snake on it. Awesome. And the shipping address and the billing address, the actual verified by Stripe that we received the payment and the shipping method. And then a summary of the cost. Beautiful. Your case is on the way. Now let's check my email. And yes, we did actually get an email. If I just drag this over right here, you can see what happens right here. From Case Cobra, thanks for your order. We're preparing everything for delivery and will notify you once your package has been delivered. Delivery usually takes 2 days, blah, blah, blah. Perfect. And then this little like footer at the bottom, that is awesome. Oh, and I think, oh yeah, order number. That's what we forgot to change. This should be the order date, of course. And then a little padding. I'm just gonna fix that in the, or actually should we just fix it together? Let's just fix it together. Why not? Let's go into our email and let's just fix it. So we should have order number here twice, right? Let's see. Yeah, we forgot to change that. This should be the order date. And then let's also give this let's give the entire column a style, and that's gonna be a margin left of, let's say, 20, because right now it looks like this is a bit close to the left side here. You know, it's just not ideal. So we can kind of space it out and actually change this to the order date, which is today, right? The 3rd of May, 2024. Beautiful. Shipping to Josh. And then the random address I entered. Thank you for your order. Dude, this is awesome. I can move my email out of the screen again. And that's it. Now we can see this order pop up in our dashboard from our customer. We can see our revenue has increased, right? We're closer to our goal of $500. Very, very nice. By $22 from the second order. And the status is, of course, going to be awaiting shipment with our order details right here. The purchase date, the amount. Beautiful. And now once we actually forwarded this case printing request to our supplier, or you printed it yourself, whatever you want, you can change the status to shipped. And you can also change the status to fulfilled once the order is actually done. So a beautiful admin dashboard where you can keep track of your financials and manage all the customers and the order statuses. Dude, this is awesome. I know this was a really long video, but big respect for following along, honestly. I really hope you learned a lot. This app works so nice. Let's log out again. That's gonna refresh the complete page and take us to the landing page. And there we are. That just looks beautiful. It was really important for me to have everything in the single video. No extras, no payments needed, no credit card. And I really hope you agreed that I kept my promise in the beginning to show you all the conceptual stuff, that we go in depth into the stuff. And I really, really hope you enjoyed this build process. Enjoy the artwork that the illustrator made specifically for this project that I hired. And thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And then I'm going to do the actual outro in person right now. Hey man, I really hope you enjoyed this video. You cannot imagine how much work this was to make. It was a lot, but it's really worth it. I love seeing your reactions to it. Thanks again, big time for Too Kind for sponsoring this video. And by the way, since finishing the video, I forgot one thing, and that's like the gradient that's on the homepage. I forgot we didn't do it in the video, but I added it in the GitHub repository. It takes like 1 minute to implement. It's very simple. I just forgot to do it in the video, but that's the only thing we forgot. All else is implemented, and I really appreciate you following along. And I hope you agree that I kept my promise of the 3 things you're gonna learn in this video: how to write good software, how to write good UI, and so on. Hey, so thanks for following along. It really means a lot, and I hope you enjoyed this video a ton. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you, and I'm gonna see you in the next video. Until then, have a good one, and bye-bye. It feels weird just ending a 12-hour video I spent so much time on like this. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.